She's not here.
Chaos abounds, y'all. Chaos abounds. I'm ready to rock and roll. Okay. Did we even with? Okay. All right. Y'all, it's 7 o'clock. We ready to go? Very good. Noting the hour in the presence of a quorum, I call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting online may use ActonTV's YouTube channel found at the top of the agenda. This meeting is also being recorded and will be posted on ActonTV's website at actontv.org. Regarding our upcoming elections, 6 Acton residents are running for our 3 open seats in the election on April 25th. They are, if you're here, raise your hand, Courtney Berrialt, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Victoria Campbell, hello, Jason Fitzgerald, I'm not gonna go with the middle names on this, Michael Gowing, very good, Leela Ramchamadran, got it right, and I'm saying Lucianne Schmidt. Are you here? Lucianne here? Okay, very good. All right, so 4 Boxborough residents are running for our 2 open seats for Boxborough residents in their election on May 16th. They are Rick Barrett, Chad Childers, Lakshmi Kaja, I hope I pronounced that correctly. You did. Thank you. And Vikram Parikh, did I pronounce that correctly? I don't know, but he's not here. Okay, none of y'all are here. Are there any of these candidates in the audience tonight who would like to say hello? It was written on the thing. I'm just reading the script. I didn't think anybody would actually be fool enough to step on up, but here we are. We got 2.
Hi.
Ready to go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Campbell on the ballot. I go by Tori. Victoria is kind of for official use only, or when my dad is mad at me. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to everybody who's doing this. Everything I've learned as I've been diving deeply into this tells me you all know a lot. You have borne a lot of weight for our community, and you have done good work. And I'm really grateful to what you've done and the time that you've taken to help kind of educate all of us as we've been asking questions and trying to wait, what was that circuit breaker thing again, and how does this all work? So thank you for that. Yeah, vote on April 25th.
Yeah, hello. I'd just like to second that. After having running a campaign for a couple months, I have a whole lot more respect. Well, I have a whole new respect, let me put it that way. Well, more and new. I didn't want to say one way or the other, but for what you all have done, what you and I also want to say thank you for, I know that 5 of you are going to be done either this meeting or the next one, and it's been a really rough 3 years, so thank you for all that you've done for that time. Thank you.
Hello, Leela Ramachandran, 9 Arborwood Road. I am running for school committee, and tomorrow is the last day to register to vote, and if you're an Acton resident, so please vote.
Thank y'all. Register and vote, y'all. Okay, here we go. Best part of the meeting. We have student representative update. Welcome to our high school student reps. The students report at our meetings each month and share some perspective on current events at the high school. This is per our policy JIB, student involvement in decision making. Who's coming up to say hi? Don't be shy. All of y'all, one of y'all. Be sure to introduce yourself. Good evening.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Julia Zhou, and I am a freshman representative from the high school. I'd like to share a couple updates regarding like book fair events and authors visits. So tomorrow at the high school, we're going to be having a AB graduate author, Nora Shalloway Carpenter. She'll be visiting us, sharing some details about her new book she published, and it's about like mental health and the journey to like embracing one's mental identity, I guess. And yeah, I think this will be really exciting. I know a lot of English classes will be attending in the auditorium, I believe. And yeah, I'm excited for this, and I think it'll go really well. I'm also as a freshman class leader, we've been planning a book fair with the high school admin for a couple weeks, couple months now. And I'd just like to say, and I'd encourage everyone to come to the book fair. It'll be early May, and we'll have more details about that coming up. But yeah, these events should be pretty exciting for the community, and I hope that they can be like some positive stuff during these times. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Go to book fairs. Book fairs are awesome.
Hi, I'm Molly Norris. I'm a sophomore, and I know the course leveling is already on the agenda for tonight, but I figured there's not going to be much student voice in that because it's a presentation. So I wanted to give what I've seen as a student opinion so far about the course leveling. From what I've seen and from what I've heard from my friends, it's not being taken very well, and I think that could be due to a couple of factors. It could be due to the fact that it wasn't advertised very well, and my advisory teacher was talking about this, but people don't really understand what a lot of the parts mean, and they have some misconceptions. And I also think because students didn't get much of a say from what we know and what the process was, so we weren't very aware of what was going to happen. And I just want to share a personal story relating to it. Next year I was planning on taking AE Chem because I'm not super into science, but I'm like fine with it. And now there's only unleveled chem and honors chem, and because of pressure from my friends and other students and my teacher, now I feel the need to take honors chem, and so that's what I signed up for. And I'm really worried that next year I'm gonna have to either drop down or something, or just like struggle a lot because of the pressure I was feeling from other people, because I didn't have the option to take a middle level chem. I had to choose between unleveled and honors. So that's my personal story, and my friend made a survey, and I know that got shared with admin, the results. But overall, I don't think the students are very happy about it because we don't know very much information, even after there were meetings about it and assemblies. So I just think that is our opinion. And I know that doesn't control everything, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Molly, you're going to stick around for the presentation, yeah? Yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you. Welcome, welcome.
Hello, I'm Diksha Mhatre, and I'm a freshman. And I would like to share with you all about the Student Council founding this new act called the Eric Yao Act. Student Council plans on donating $50,000 over the next decade to fund student organizations and other events. And I think it's great because I'm a part of this. I'm a part of the South Asian Club, DESE, and they just recently hosted an event for the Festival of Holi. And I think it's wonderful that students are initiating this process of educating and sharing cultures with each other. And I think this, the Eric Yao Act is going to help this and bring more events like this to promote diversity and cultural awareness in our community. And so I'm excited to see where this new act goes and the events that will stem from this. I would also like to share that tomorrow there's going to be field day, and I think it's going to be great that we're going to enjoy the weather, and hope you all have a great spring break. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Book fairs and field days, good throwback. I'm glad that those things are alive and kicking. Thank you to our student leaders. It's so good to have you. All right, here we go. Public participation. Per School Committee Policy BEDH, members of the public are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes regarding items that are not on the agenda. For items that are on the agenda, the public is asked to please wait for that item. Speakers must be recognized by the chair before speaking. The committee does not typically respond to comments during public participation. Well then. Superintendent Light, do you have an update for us?
I do. I want to start with some congratulations, then I have a number of district updates as well. So first, in 2017, Governor Baker signed a bill to establish a state seal of biliteracy and join other states nationally in recognizing and celebrating the gift of bilingualism. The Seal of Biliteracy is an award given by a school district in recognition of students who have studied and attained a proficiency in speaking, reading, listening, and writing in 2 or more languages by high school graduation. I want to congratulate all of our graduates. Deb Bookus and I were able to join a number of world language teachers and Principal Dean at the high school the other day and actually hand out the Seals of Biliteracy to the graduates. I don't have the exact number. Principal Dean, do you remember how many? I think it was 30, approximately 30 students. Yeah, between 30 and 40 students attained that, which is a tremendous accomplishment. So I want to congratulate that group of students. We both also had an opportunity yesterday to see 22 of our high school seniors sign their binding national letter of intents to participate in a collegiate sport with the school that's member of the NCAA, or the National Collegiate Athletic Association. This accomplishment represents years of hard work and support from families. We just want to congratulate our student athletes and wish them good luck next year. We also have a group of our elementary students from Gates, Conant, and Douglas who are participating in a National LEGO League competition for first LEGO League Explore World Festival in Houston, Texas from April 19th through the 22nd. They will join approximately 33,000 students and guests from more than 40 countries. Which is approximate based on 2020 attendance. So should be a great time for that group of kids. I also want to congratulate one of our Gates 4th grade students, Adarsh Venkan, oh geez, I'm so sorry, Venkanagari. I actually practiced that, and then when I read it, it didn't work, who has won the regional spelling bee and is going to the Scripps National Spelling Bee in Washington, D.C., so congratulations. And also congratulations to Douglas School 6th grader Dia Prakash, a winner of the Massachusetts School Library Association Bookmark Contest. So congratulations to all of our students. I also want to highlight that we just offered our first Portuguese language and culture course for our staff here in the district. So Gabby Anella, who is the administrative assistant in the McCarthy Town Elementary School, taught a course which was titled Introduction to Portuguese Language, Brazilian Culture, and Schooling for Acton-Boxborough staff. Gabby just this week invited Portuguese-speaking alumni, students, and families to a session to speak about their schooling experience in Brazil. AB staff members also enjoyed feasting on the Brazilian food while they practiced their beginning Portuguese language skills they've learned in that course. So this is an example how exploring various cultures and traditions and languages we can strengthen the engagement and relationships with our students and families. We are also very pleased to announce we were just awarded a $200,000 grant by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. That was a competitive grant, and that is for accelerating literacy learning through high-quality instructional materials. The grant will help fund our new elementary literacy program, providing a high-quality and evidence-based literacy program for all of our K-6 students. Throughout the year, a literacy task force composed of 24 educators and school leaders in partnership with Hill for Literacy led over 70 educators to review programs that would complement the district's foundational skills programs. EL Education has been chosen to complete our literacy program K-6 in the areas of reading comprehension, vocabulary, and upper grade word study. The program is also aligned with the district's goal of providing students with culturally responsive books and materials. So we're pleased that that will be coming forward. We also have been awarded a $26,000 grant for civics teaching and learning grant. So we were awarded the $26,000 competitive grant to support civic teaching and learning in our classrooms. The grant seeks to fund initiatives that exemplify equity and that all students should have access to high-quality, culturally relevant civics learning experiences in which academic achievement, cultural competence, and socio-political awareness are at the core. Deeper learning, and that opportunities for students to master civic knowledge, skills, and dispositions, and sustainability, taking steps toward long-term enhancement to civics teaching and learning. We will use this grant to support elementary civics education by contracting Primary Source to provide professional learning on the resource cornerstones for civic engagement. This learning will be open to grade 3 and 4 educators across 6 elementary schools, including classroom teachers, English language development teachers, and special educators. So we're excited. And if you recall, I also had announced a couple meetings ago that we had received a $100,000 grant for mathematics education, which was also a competitive grant, $50,000 for hate crimes prevention. And we also received a much smaller grant that's going to allow us to place some dynamic speed zone signs along Charter Road as people come and go. I also just want to put out the word for Project Graduation. Project Graduation is incredibly important for our district. So the AB class of 2024 needs volunteers badly. For 30+ years, Project Graduation has been housing Grad Night, a safe, substance-free, all-night lock-in party for the ABRHS senior class. Currently, the future of Grad Night is uncertain. Help is needed to continue this tradition that keeps our graduates safe and off the roads on what is statistically one of the most dangerous nights for them. So we're going to send out some links to families for ways that they can contact Project Graduation to get involved, and we would certainly urge our families, particular families of younger students, really want to be getting involved with that to make sure that we can sustain that program over the long term. I've also mentioned before that we've had a series around mental health with our partner Cartwheel Care. We are pleased to be able to provide those opportunities for families. We do have another upcoming webinar that is going to be Wednesday, May 3rd at 7 p.m. that is titled Caring for Kids, Caring for Parents, Fostering Resilience in Our Kids and Ourselves. So we're going to send out the registration information for that. We have another community coffee coming up with Kyra and I on April 26th at 8:30 in the morning. That's in person here in the administration building. And we had another one scheduled for May 24th in the evening. However, I have a conflict now that night, and we're gonna move that to the morning. So we'll send that out information, and then we have some information going out to families about some upcoming events. So lots going on. Again, busy time of year.
Thank you so much. All right, so good. It's past 7:15, so we can do our public hearing. And so here we go. I'm going to call it to order. So, because we don't have to vote ourselves into it. Thank you. All right. Noting the hour in the presence of a quorum, I call the FY24 ABRSD MA DESE School Choice Program public hearing to order. Good Lord. That was a lot of words. Ready? Somebody giving a presentation on that?
Marie, can you maybe speak a little bit to that?
Sure thing. There's a memo in your packet. Awesome. So as you know, we used to accept school choice students at grades 7 through 12. Before regionalization, Boxborough Public Schools accepted school choice students K-6 when in times of very significantly declining enrollment. That has not been our situation for many years. Once we accepted students, we then accepted siblings for as long as that went. So it's been about 15 years since we accepted new students, again, as enrollment grew. And now we've accepted all of the siblings of school choice students that we've had. We're down to about 10 school choice students. And 2 years ago, the school committee voted to withdraw from the school choice program. When you are in it, you vote how many seats you have at any particular grade. And so as kids were graduating, the school committee only voted enough seats for siblings of families that had been previously accepted. If you were to take school choice students, you get about $5,000 per student from the state, basically offset Chapter 70 aid, and we know that our per pupil costs are a little bit over $15,000 per student. So the recommendation is to remain withdrawn from the program. It is something that you need to vote every year, so each school committee has a chance to revisit it. And again, it's because of lack of availability of seats and so on in our current environment. It may be in some number of years you might change your mind, but that's the recommendation, and happy to answer any questions.
I just have a quick question. I know in some special circumstances, staff or administrators who are not residents of Acton or Boxborough may have the opportunity to have their children become students in the district. Are those considered choice students?
So that is a contractual benefit with limits, and no, they cannot be counted as choice students whether you're in the choice program or not.
Great, thank you.
Is there anybody in the public audience who would like to comment or ask a question, as it is a public hearing? All right, y'all.
I'd like to make a motion.
Of what?
I would like to read the recommended motion in the packet, in the memo in the packet.
Okay. Okay, so you want to make a different kind of motion?
I guess I want to move to adjourn the public hearing.
Great, so Adam just moved.
Second.
Thank you, Liz. That was Adam and Liz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, very good. All right, so then, now, would you like to read the motion that's in the packet?
Yeah, there's a motion in the memo. There's no motion in the packet, so I'm going to the motion in the memo. So I move that the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee remain withdrawn from the school choice program due to class size and space limitations. Existing school choice students will remain through graduation.
Second.
Giving it to Liz. So that was Adam and it was Liz. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good, that was unanimous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. All right, now we are on to guests and presentations. I believe that our first update comes from RJ Gray, and I think that we get to welcome Principal Marcotte. Good evening, sir. Peter, do you want to give any more of an introduction than that?
No, just as we're getting into school updates, you know, I think I talked about this at the beginning of the year, but we've tried to have a predictable arc of the year now for school committee as we think about what meetings look like. So as we started the year, we did a lot of work at the district level talking about the different goals that we had as a district. So we presented to you on social emotional learning, mental and behavioral health. We did presentations on culturally responsive practice. We did presentations on literacy and the goals we have around literacy, and then around mathematics. That was the beginning of the school year. Then we went into budget season, and we focused primarily on budget as a school committee. Now, as we round out the year, this is an opportunity to kind of hear from schools about what this actually looked like in action. So you heard from the district, you heard educators across the district talk about the work we were doing, and now it's what has happened in our schools at the end of the year. So hopefully that brings a sense of closure to what we kicked off talking about from a high-level perspective. So wanted to just frame that for you because I think it's an important perspective. I'm hoping that that works as an overall arc, and if it does, then that's something that we could actually have as a predictable plan, that you have a beginning of the year to learn about the work of the district and the different program updates, things like that. We get into budget season, and then we think about how do we update you on the work that we've done in spring. So with that, our first big update, there's no pressure on you, Jim, because you're the first.
That's right.
But I do want to welcome Jim Marcotte, principal of RJ Gray, so I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Peter. And thank you to the school committee for having me tonight. I've prepared some slides, which I think you've probably already seen, but I'm happy to talk about the junior high and our arc of this year. We've done some really great things for kids. We did a lot of things, the four named in the bullets there, and really when I think about those and the work that really comes out of each of those items that I'll talk more about, is that relationships are really important. And in some cases it's relationships between adults, in a lot of cases it's between students and between adults as well. So I'll go through each of the four items that are there with a few additions towards the end. We were the beneficiaries of LIFT's training, and so in the prior slide it called it the Leslie Institute for Trauma Sensitivity. The schools K through 8 this year engaged in this. We had a wonderful man from Lesley University who actually spoke here back in the fall, Zhou. He was the trainer for the junior high and presented 6 hours of training over 3 different of our early release times. And really what it takes to make a trauma sensitive and safe school for all. And so that was our entire staff. We included our assistants to come in or to stay on those longer days. And really, we all took a lot away from it. The nice part that I am also proud of our staff is that in addition to that 6-hour training, 20 of us took the first grad course through this LIFT program, which is really an overview of their entire coursework. 20 staff members from junior high did that. 8 of us have since taken course number 2, which really focuses on classroom and student supports. We are very much anticipating and hoping that we'll be able to offer course 3, which I do know focuses on the school-wide lens of kind of how to create a trauma-sensitive environment. So we are very pleased with the work. As a little tidbit, this spring I would really like the people who have gone through the grad courses and anybody interested to really take a look at our handbook with us. Like, let's look at our handbook with this lens of trauma sensitivity in mind, and to see kind of what shifts we might decide to make based on what we now know. A big takeaway from the LIFT training is about relationships with kids is really what will keep them connected to you, keep them connected to their peers, and really make for a strong environment. So we're very pleased with the time we've spent with LIFTs this year. Secondly, I point out we're doing a lot of work, we're doing some work, not a lot yet, regarding culturally responsive teaching, and teacher leaders, as you all know. The junior high has 4 culturally responsive teacher leaders who are, they come to work every day and they do their, 8 to 2:36 job, and in addition to that, they really help, they're working with Jen Faber on becoming proficient themselves in what this work is, and they're bringing it back to our school. We have a book study going on right now with 17 adults, and we are studying the book that's pictured there, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. And we've then taken that, and our CRTLs have taken 2 staff meetings to lead our entire staff. And really focusing, the 2 topics that we've focused on so far are kind of how do we move students from dependent to independent learners? It's a real task, and it's a real challenge, for sure. Our most recent work with that group was about defining the levels of culture. So, we all understand the cultural norms that happen at a surface level, and we don't always pay attention to the things that are at a deeper level. But really to understand culture is to know how to teach your students. One example of a takeaway from this is an English teacher recently did that idea of levels of culture with her students. And they kind of defined their own culture, and then they looked at a character from the text they were reading and helped to define what does their culture look like. So we are seeing examples of teachers bringing this into their classroom in more than just a theoretical manner. So as we engage and kind of begin the path of this work, I'm very excited with the people we have leading the work at our school and just the responsiveness of our staff, really for hopes of bringing it together for kids. Again, going to relationships matter. In our family communication, we really have put an emphasis this year at the junior high. And of course, the first thing I say talks about what we've eliminated. If you've had a junior high student, you may have been at some point exposed to the idea of the 5-minute conferences, kind of speed dating style, and I see some nods. Exiting last year and entering this year, I, and amongst others, was thinking, this is not the way to spend our time trying to engage families, because it doesn't actually, 5 minutes may be pleasantries and you have a nice polite conversation, but you don't quite have enough time to get into the nitty gritty if there are some challenges. So we chose to say, instead of 3 half days, 9 hours of kids not in school, we eliminated that, keeping kids in school with an attempted different focus to connect with families. By September 30th, the goal was, and we did achieve it, all families would hear from some educator at the junior high about their child at the beginning of the year. So I happened to reach out to the 9 families of kids in my advisory group. Team teachers divided up a team up, and they each contacted 20 families. And then you have the phys ed teachers and art teachers who just had a connection in some other way. So we all did that as a way to kick off the year saying, it's important to communicate. I live in another town, and I have my middle child's a kindergartner, and there's really nothing better than receiving the email with a couple of pictures of them like looking for the bear in the woods and kind of going on a little, scavenger hunt. And just those little things show me as a dad, wow, that teacher knows my kid. That's what we're trying to replicate. It's a different practice because we have teams with hundreds of students, you know what I mean? Each team has about 100 or more students. So we're trying to get there. It's probably not met every person's need this year, but I think we did a good job by saying, no, kids back in class, let's not dismiss early for those 3 half days anymore, with an attempt. We continue to have our team meetings where families can have a 20-minute meeting when they need it and when it's available to all of us with the teachers during the day, and really focus in on your child for those 20 minutes with all the teachers around the same table. Additional opportunities we're looking at for next year to be determined. In May, we are going to be, as part of the district, all schools will do it using the Panorama survey again. In the junior high specific survey, we've added 2 open-ended questions. One of them is, in what other ways would you benefit from having communication with your child's teachers? Because the families and the parents are the ones who need to access us and want to access us, and the real question is, are we being available to them? And are they getting what they need? So that, I'm hopeful, will bring about some ideas for us to then be able to improve for next year. But going back to my whole theme, that relationships with parents and families really matters, and it's something that we've taken very seriously this year. The next piece, you've seen this slide in probably last year's presentation when I talked about advisory. We were implementing it for the first time last May. It was in theory. I now know how it works, but the real goals had been forming connections and relationships, kids with adults, and as well as the idea we were gonna expose our students to and begin to figure out how do we kind of teach some of these SEL competencies that we believe in the district. And then the last thing, students will have fun. So I have a little bit of some anecdotes on how those things have gone. This is some data from our Panorama student survey from December. So we'll do it again in May. I just obviously don't have those results. But I was pleased with some of the results here. So the first question, how often is advisory an enjoyable place to be? Always or usually, I view as positive responses. As an overall, that's 80% of our students said that, and that was in December. So we were about 3 months into the school year with a brand new program. On the right columns, you see I point out that 7th graders responded much more favorably than 8th graders. That didn't surprise any of us. Okay, 7th graders developmentally are still at that point of seeking connection. They're brand new to the school. We actually structured advisory that the first day of school, the first person they met was their advisor. And so I think that actually led to a little bit of a positive response. And it's not to say that 8th graders are not enjoying it, but they had all of 7th grade without this program. And so I'm hoping that in May we see a larger percent favorable. And if we don't, we'll continue to work on it. But I was happy with that set of data points. How is your relationship with your advisor? Again, strong or good as being strong answers. 83% of our total kids said, yes, I have a strong or good relationship. And again, you see the difference between 7th and 8th. Again, we think developmentally appropriate. That's not something that I'm losing sleep over by any means. The last one, how many adults at school can you identify as people you trust? This is kind of a common question that lots of schools ask. Last year at this time, we had done a similar survey, and it was in May, and I said to you, 80% of our kids in May last year said they had a positive, 1 or more adults. This is reporting from December that 80% of our students had 1 or more adults. So again, I'm really looking forward to that May data that we'll do again in a month or so. I'm hoping for in the 90s about what that percentage looks like. There is an asterisk next to the far right column. Panorama defined only more than 1 as a favorable response. And so the numbers are off, right? So I combine those green, more than 1 and 1 is 80%. 7th and 8th grade, we don't see those students who identified 1 adult. So it's just with a grain of salt, just the way the survey has come back. But 80% of kids said in December they had somebody at school. Ideally, we want 100%. We're gonna keep working on it. In advisory, every month we have a theme for the month. The first, September was about belonging. And then one of those advisory sessions per month we dedicate to a lesson that all of the advisories do at the same time. So the first one in belonging, it's a children's book, but we read or watched the video of the reading of Dot Day. It's like, what's your mark you're gonna place on the school? These are 7th and 8th graders. And they all made their dots, which for my advisory meets in my office, and they're still hanging there now. So they'll be there until these kids move on to the high school. Recently, we did our SEL theme was about change, and that was just this week. And we watched a little video clip, but we talked with kids about think of a change that either has happened to you or is coming your way. And when you think about in the back, what was the emotion you had before it happened? What was the emotion you had after it happened? And again, the small group of 8 or 9 students that I was chatting with, they're deep and they're insightful, and they, we give them a couple strategies to think about when you're thinking about change. So we are trying to embed some SEL, social emotional learning themes into our advisory program for the very first time. I think we've been successful, and I'm happy with the work we're doing, knowing that we'll continue to do it and continue to make it better. On the right column, you see there, we had to kind of make ad hoc decisions about how else do we use advisory. So you're all aware, the back of the first half of the year, we had some incidences of particularly swastikas drawn in our school. Then in January, we had an issue of airdrops that were highly inappropriate, dropped to students on a bus. So each of those times, we stopped our plan and used our longer advisory sessions to have conversations. So when we talked about the impact and the history of the swastika, we did a community circle, students read text from an Anti-Defamation League article, and then they had honest conversations with each other. And actually, I think it was quite productive. And then later, again, in January, we focused on the aspect of the technology that was allowing something so hateful to be shared. So in those two instances, we tried to use the advisory location and setting as a way to talk with kids about what our community should be. We do have some changes coming up for advisory for next year. Currently, we meet either at a 10-minute session or a 25-minute session. We've all found, kids included, that 10 minutes is too short. And really, that was year one, thinking like, we got to make sure we all can buy into this. And so we set that mark. We can all do 10 minutes. But next year, we're moving to 20 minutes twice a week on a consistent basis. We will continue to have school-wide topics for discussion. We really want to beef up the idea of what the theme is of the month. So when the theme is gratitude, like what do more of those sessions about gratitude feel like in advisory? We're going to have 7th graders who are currently with their advisors, mostly loop in that same group with the same advisor in 8th grade. We do recognize there are some groups that are not they're not as functional as they should be. So we will make some changes just to make sure that in 8th grade it all feels really strong for them. And so in my case, my advisees are leaving to 9th grade. I'll start over with 7th graders and I'll keep them for 2 years. So that's kind of the loop that we are hoping kind of lasts and really makes that strong relationship and connection. We will reduce the number of groups we have right now. For example, we have 39 advisory groups in the 7th grade. If we pull a few of those away to allow for an administrator, to allow for a few other people to not have a group, will lead actually to a little bit more oversight and will lead to, an easier time when a teacher's out and we need to sub in for that group. So, but again, the continued focus will be on relationships and belonging and fun and connecting with those SEL and, frankly, more DEI themes that we need to be including. I noted earlier, and this is not about relationships, though it is connected, of course, we have had incidents of bias this year, and you've heard about those already. Peter and Jen and I met maybe about a month ago, maybe less than, at Congregation Beth Elohim with the members of their congregation for a really productive conversation. It was a back and forth, and we got to hear student experiences and family experiences about how incidents of bias, particularly anti-Semitism, has affected that group. And so it was eye-opening and important for us to do that. I'm happy we did. That has led to us working with the Anti-Defamation League to hopefully bring the World of Difference program to the junior high for next year. Jen Faber and I are Zooming with the ADL next week, so hopefully to find out more about how a peer leader model program could work at the junior high. And there's certainly feedback for me as a new leader in this area, and the idea is quicker and more direct response to people affected. And so I can stretch that to when we have incidents of bullying. Quicker and more caring response to the person affected matches the same. So again, to come back to relationships and the idea that we can do that. We have a newer leadership team at our junior high who's very committed to making this feel better on macro incidents like this and certainly micro as well. We certainly do student learning at the junior high. It's not all fun and games, right? But we do have a math-focused goal in our school improvement plan, and it's really to move students who are 1 or 2 grade levels below on iReady, as measured by iReady through the May assessment, move them. We don't have the May assessment. I'm confident that we have moved some kids for sure, but we'll certainly have more data as the year closes out. We have a math explorations class. I highlighted it as an example. It's existed for a few years, and the most recent iteration of it has kind of mirrored the 7th grade math curriculum, for example. So it provides support to kids who kind of struggle in that. And we actually have realized we've missed an opportunity. We have students in 7th or 8th grade who would benefit from a more focused on their math facts again, and their practicing division and all those things. So by shifting the model a little bit, we can actually have more students kind of accessing that math specialist. So we're excited about that. I've talked to you before about our 7 and 8 red teams where they are are connected to our Compass program. They teach 4 classes, and their 5th class is really a push-in, or it's a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 model where they're working with kids. Our Compass program is our social emotional program. Thank you to all of you for reinstating our health position a month or so ago. That is what has allowed us to go back to allow this model. For lots of reasons in scheduling, it wouldn't have worked had we lost that position. So I really do thank you. And this has been productive for us, and we're going to give it one more year of really studying it to make sure that it's serving our kids and our teachers well. And the last thing I want to say is, so I was doing this as I was watching the, it's not the Great British Bake Off, but it's the Home Chef, and the woman was like always saying enormous thanks. So somehow it ended up in my own presentation. So I'm sorry. It's very British of me. The people on that screen are some of the many people who every day work their butts off to do good things for our kids. This year we've had budget reductions, we've had a major lack of substitutes, which has improved. I've asked them to do things that are additional to what they've always done. We've not taken a single thing off their plate. I want us to all just remember that we've not taken anything off their plate. And they come to work generally smiling. And they really work hard for kids, and they really commit to a community of the adults and themselves, but they really, connect with our families and our students in a major way. And I just have to, I would not be where I am or comfortable presenting about our school without the dedication of our hardworking teachers, assistants, custodians, bus drivers, food services, et cetera. So that's where I want to wrap up, and I certainly entertain questions or comments or anything that you've got.
2 questions. First, if we could go back to the slide on the survey data.
Yes.
One of the things I'm concerned about is that I see that 17% of the entire student body either has a strained or no relationship with their advisors. What is the plan to decrease that number and make sure that there are more connections made between faculty and students?
Yeah, I think the plan, like as I noted, this is from December data. That advisory group has continued to meet since then and will continue to meet. I think it's the frequency of it and hopefully we find the time to connect about something that's interesting to you, and that little thing pivots you potentially into calling it a good relationship. So I don't have a great answer other than teachers are committed to keeping this at the forefront. Strong relationship with kids is really important. And since then, it has just been the time spent. As I noted as well, in our 7th and 8th grade idea of looping, we are looking at all 7th grade groups. Does there need to be a shift for somebody? And it likely be from the student's perspective, like, yeah, this just doesn't jive with me. I could use something different. We're very open to making a change into 8th grade.
Great. I look forward to seeing the data for next year or later this year,
Yeah.
I should say. Secondly, you mentioned that you may not be able to implement the World of Difference program. With anti-Semitism surging in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, what is the contingency plan if you're not able to implement that for next year? Because I have concerns as a parent, and I've seen, the data. I hear from my son, there was a swastika incident just yesterday or today reported in the high school. Mm-hmm. So something needs to be done.
Something needs to be done, I agree with you. And I just want to connect this to a couple of things, including, so Peter has been leading recently the Leadership Coalition to End Hate and Bias Language, of which I'm a member. So I think, and you're a member too, Ben. I think that group hopefully has some productive conversation that involves more than just the schools. Certainly the place where that was drawn was in a school. The place where the incidents at my school were certainly school related, right? We're certainly not teaching that. And so we have to find the way to combat that while they've learned it somewhere else or through technology or media or whatever. Why I might have said a world of difference trying to make it happen, the peer leader model that I've studied, and I've talked to Stony Brook Middle School in Westford, Millbury Junior Senior High School, and one of the middle schools in Franklin, all who have other grades attached. We don't have a 6th grade in our school. And so the peer leader model often is 7th and 8th graders are becoming the peer leaders, delivering a couple of lessons each year in the 6th grade. So we really want to work and figure out how does that work at the junior high with students of their own grade. So we're committed to figuring out how this happens, because I think the peer part of it is certainly instrumental and hopefully effective. Separately, in our social studies curriculum, already is embedded the ideas of all the isms, all the things that students get taught in 7th grade. back when our stuff was, bubbling, I went to social studies and I said, all right, tell me, what do you teach about, the Holocaust, and what do you teach about Hitler? And they connected to actually the American Bill of Rights and kind of the idea of rights and all those things. More particularly, the social studies coordinator said, but we've not taught about the swastika. It's like, okay, maybe that's something we could include for next year. So I think through our curriculum, we also can find ways to do it. The ADL also has a curriculum that can be teacher delivered as well. So as part of our work with the ADL, I think that it will certainly be, if we can't pull off the peer-led thing immediately, what can we do through our teachers in our classes? I agree with you, it's an enormous problem, statewide, nationwide, and we're committed to working with Jen, working with others to figure out how do we best squash that at the junior high. Thank you. Okay, you're welcome.
Two questions sort of following up on what Ben said, but they both sort of relate to the high school, and maybe Joanie will have to answer when she does her thing, but I did actually read the packet and I looked at your slide deck and you don't have things about this. But we've changed the advisory at the high school like 18 million times. And so is there discussion, like right now the advisory is like all the grades in one advisory. And when Lily started as a freshman, she's a senior now, it was, you're gonna travel with this, advisory through senior year, and then COVID happened. So that's like nobody's fault, but now it's been totally readjusted to that. And the same thing with the peer leader program. When Lily was a freshman, I believe that's when we instituted the peer leader program, and then COVID happened. And so, to the best of my knowledge, that didn't really end up happening at the high school. No?
A world of difference is existing at the high school.
Exists, yeah. But, okay. But there was
I'll let Joanie answer those.
There was a big gap and we're still having swastikas on desks. So it's not as effective, maybe, as it could be. But, so is there conversation about how you're choosing to do advisory, which sounds fantastic. There was no advisory when my kids were in junior high. So I think that's wonderful. But we talk in this district a lot about streamlining across buildings and across programs and everything else. This seems like something where maybe this is the answer to all the things that you're saying. I don't know, but is that part of the conversation?
I love the catch-all that this would work for everything, right?
Right.
No, in terms of how the junior high and high school connect about this, we each have sets of teacher leaders who presented to you back in the fall. And those people have connected to each other over time for sure. When we were developing our program back, we took a lot of last year to kind of lay out and get staff feedback and all that. So I would only say the junior high advisory program works for the junior high. I can't comment that it doesn't work at the high school or that our program would work there.
Well, no, and I'm not asking if it will, obviously it's different. It's totally different. Yep. Like junior high has teams, they have teachers that work together. I understand that. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying we've been working a lot on advisory at the high school and making it get to the point of working. It just seems, even though they're two different programs, I don't know, can we come together?
I think there is a lot. I think there's a lot of information to learn from each other. But I'll say that yes, Joanie and I have talked about advisory a lot. Our teacher leaders have connected about advisory, and I think each school is pursuing its own path. The common thing, as you pointed out, the continuity is we're all doing advisory right now, and that's the first time ever that's happened. So I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the work that we're doing, and I do think it complements. My students the other day, they asked, "What does advisory look like in high school?" And I said, what they currently do is you'd be two ninth graders joining an advisory where those two seniors have left. So there's kind of an up and running thing, and we've just approached it differently, knowing that the readiness in 7th and 8th grade is, no, you're better off with just 7th graders, and the conversations are more appropriate and different. So that's just how we've pursued it.
Tessa, I think it's a great question. I think, one of the things that makes me think of is I think there's a reason why most school districts have stopped calling it junior high school, because it's actually not junior high school. It's a middle level, and I think all of the research and evidence has pointed to there are very unique developmental needs of that age group. And in our district in particular, we're in a unique situation where it's a 2-grade school, and so 7th grade is spent transitioning students into junior high, and then 8th grade is spent transitioning kids to high school and getting them ready for that. And so you don't have that longevity of program that many other places have. And so I think, I would not envision necessarily the same type of programming between those two, but I think the consistency of having advisory as a model from 7th grade through high school, kind of as a follow-up to the work we do in responsive classroom and morning circles and everything else at the elementary level, is something that over time can have an impact. And I think the consistency of that approach for students is what actually then makes it more effective over time, because, you know, we know that the first time you introduce something with a group of students, if they did something different before or they had something else that they liked, it's really hard to envision what you don't know or haven't experienced yet. And so I think that's a lot of that shift at the high school in particular has been the change. And it's harder to get kids to buy in if you're constantly changing what's happening.
Well, I mean, having a child that's been on the cusp of all the different programs, I mean, I understand. I'm not, you know, it's not a personal situation. I guess I meant more like, are the concepts around what we're talking about in advisory and what its purpose is being continued into, because obviously the programming would be different. And that's helpful to know, to think about what you just said, which is that 2 9th graders will join a group that 2 12th graders left. But, you know, having a child that's been on the cusp of every single, you know, change along the way, that doesn't make sense, you know, so that does make sense. Thank you.
Hi. I think it's great that you're planning to review the handbook after doing the LIFTS training. I bet there's all sorts of stuff in there that you could see with new eyes. I also had a question about students and the ones that reported disliking advisory. And because the numbers don't totally match up, I imagine there's a reason beyond just who's leading the advisory. Do you have any sense of what maybe the issue is, and do you have an idea of how to bring those students in?
Good question. So a couple of things I would think that a group dynamic could be at play. You know, I could be part of a 10-member advisory and not a single one of my friends is in that group. And that feels like, ugh, come on, I don't want to be here. There certainly could be the element of, we've even talked about like physical arrangement in the room. You know, if you're in a science classroom with the big kind of black tables, those kids don't often get put into like, all right, let's form a circle. Because it doesn't happen within the 10-minute window that I had alluded to sometimes we have right now. So those could be kind of things that like, oh, this dynamic just hasn't worked for me yet. We did do, in the past month, our 2 advisory leaders did focus groups with some students. Not a huge sample, but we wanted to hear from each 7th and 8th, sets of each 7th and 8th grade students to hear particularly about those lessons that we do. Hey, what has worked well for you? And they all say, you know, well, when we actually have conversations about things in a circle and I can see everyone, that feels better. It's like, great, that's going to now be a given that that's how things work next year. So we have tried to, and then anecdotally taking feedback from kids, what would make this better for you? We're still hearing and still trying to figure that out. I don't think we'll ever please every junior high student, and that's not the goal necessarily, but, and I don't want to diminish your question, but yeah, it's a challenge to figure out what do they need on Monday that they might feel differently on a Friday even, you know, so, yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much. Oh, Mr. Peterson, awesome.
I like the initiative that you took to reach out to families at the beginning of the year. And we're fortunate in Acton that we have a very diverse community. So particularly with respect to parents in some of those homes, English is not the first language. In terms of how you manage that this year, you know, what kind of issues did you encounter, and what might you be able to do next year to have those conversations be more effective?
Good question. So email has its pros and cons, right? It certainly is easy for us to use Bright Arrow and to translate to anybody's native, you know, preferred language and receive that email, and they can write back to us in their language and it comes to us in our language. So that is an advantage of using email, though I think that's the least personal way to do this. And so often we've tried to say like, okay, this family we haven't heard from, what can we do? And so often with either the counselor or it's potentially the EL teacher if the child is a multilingual learner, or some other adult says like, all right, let's call them. And so we use Lexikey, which is our service that we can get somebody on Zoom or on the phone to make a conversation, make a connection. We also are using, again, it's technology driven, which is our advantage at times, the Remind app. You know, there are a couple of families that throughout the year have needed even me to be in contact with. And it's really via texting through Remind, so it's not my personal anything, but they are accessing the principal in their language in an easy way. So we have found luck with technology, and we have very caring people who look out for those students, the students we know. They may very well be English, very comfortable in English as students, and the families we might be missing. But again, I go back to that translation and that attempt to contact everyone leads us to understanding. If we know in September this is a challenge, we're going to modify the way we communicate throughout the year. So we have found success. And we will again see what does the parent survey data in May tell us, and I'd be very curious to know.
Let's lit up, baby.
Thank you. Do you think it could be helpful to have 7th and 8th graders together? Because junior high for me was COVID, both 7th and 8th grade, so that obviously changed a lot of things. But do you think it could be, I think it would have been helpful for me to have some people already in the high school who I knew when I was coming into the high school, because I have one friend, or I had one friend who was a junior before I got into the high school, so coming into 9th grade for me was really hard because I didn't really have anybody to look up to because I don't have older siblings in the school or anything, so I didn't really have anybody to ask my questions except for that one person. So do you think it could be helpful for the 7th graders to be in advisory with 8th graders and have some people they know when they get to the high school that could help them out?
You're the first person who's asked it that way with that advantage in mind. So no, I'd have to think about that, Molly. I would say, when I think about that quickly, I love what the high school does with their ambassador program to kind of serve that same role, that you're connected with some student when you're leaving 8th grade and have a familiar face. That's certainly something I can think about in future iterations of advisory.
Write it down. It sounded good to me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone. You got it? Thanks.
Okay. We are now on to our second presentation of the evening. So our ABRHS update. We shall welcome back Principal Dean. Principal Dean, you've seen us a lot this year.
Yes.
Thank you so much for spending yet another evening with us. Peter, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just do a little bit of an introduction to this because I know, this is an overall high school update for the year, but a lot of what Principal Dean's going to talk about was focused on the work around course leveling. And I just want to be able to provide a little context to that. For those of you who have been on the committee for a number of years know that this is actually something that we started talking about when we developed our strategic plan for the district, was a desire to examine course levels at the high school. And so we had included that as an item in the strategic plan, and that's in the memo in your packet. What we got a little bit derailed, obviously, because of COVID, and we had to pause a lot of the work that we were thinking about doing. So last year, I had an opportunity to meet with Joanie and all of her leadership team, including all of the, assistant principals, department leaders, and just talk about what that meant. And what I asked them to do was start work with faculty and staff to develop a proposal that was far enough along to begin a discussion with the community. And so I set the expectation that this should be multi-year work. It's not fast work to think about something like this, and that we wanted to engage staff first, but with the notion that we had to engage staff first, but then talk with our students, our families, and it would have to be an iterative process before we came to a conclusion. So Joanie actually got together all of her department leaders this year, the administrators. She then brought in teachers from every department who were not necessarily the department head, as well as counselors in the high school, and developed a team that has been meeting weekly for the entire school year, just to focus on this topic and develop a proposal. So they got to a point where they had developed something they thought could spur a good discussion around this topic. They then presented that in a couple of different parent forums. We sent out the link district-wide with the video recording of that forum and invited people to participate in the survey process and provide additional feedback. Joanie then did presentations with students at the high school to gain initial feedback. She is, had been surveying her staff on smaller items all the way along. She's just sent out another staff survey to gain more feedback. And the goal for this year was to get enough initial feedback on the first round to look at it over the summer and back into the fall and continue to hone this proposal. So what you're seeing tonight is kind of the midpoint of this whole discussion. It's not an end point and it's not nearing an end point yet. Our overall goal would be to bring back more work in the fall and then be able to continue the discussion with people and eventually have a proposal that is ready to be adopted in December of next year for that work to then continue on for multiple years after that. So we are not near the end of this. We're still in midway. I tried to provide you a number of items in the packet. I know it was a very, very thick packet tonight. I apologize for that. But we gave you, the summary of survey responses. We gave you the unredacted version of the parent survey responses. When we were getting this all together, we didn't yet have all of our student responses in. Similar, we're just finishing up collecting faculty survey responses. So this is, as I said, this is an ongoing process, but this was the meeting we wanted to schedule it for. I also included, just for your reference, the policy that you have around curricular and program adoptions, so that you know kind of the process that the school committee has outlined in the past. I believe that was redone in 2021, was the most recent version of that policy. So it's a relatively recent policy. Based on all of this, I think what we're looking for tonight is, being able to, get more feedback from the school committee now, knowing that, this is an opportunity for Joanie and her team to continue to work and hone what they're thinking of doing before they come back in the fall with more information. So is that a fair introduction, Joanie?
Yes, thank you, Peter.
All right. And now we'll start with some other things, though. So
Yes.
I'll turn it over to Joanie.
All right, thank you very much. I'm very excited to share some updates about the high school for this year. And as Peter said, course leveling will be most of it towards the end, but I have a few other things to share because, well, this has been an incredible year and full of a lot of events and good learning, good community in the high school. All right, so I think I will start with my first slide here. I broke down our year in review into 3 categories: community involvement, advisory, and course leveling. So I'll start with community involvement. I think it's important to note that this is our first full year back without physical COVID restrictions. And that has meant a lot in the high school in terms of engagement and student participation. And even faculty mixing across departments. At the beginning of the school year, in both faculty meetings and assemblies, student assemblies, we asked faculty and students what they wanted out of our community and our school. And both groups chose the words respectful and inclusive to describe the community that they wanted to be a part of. And I do think that that embodies the high school and the work that we've been trying to do this year. First, in terms of student engagement and support, we focused on attendance and engaging students in getting to class. You've probably heard students across the nation are struggling to get to school, and sometimes in our school, the way we see it is students missing a class, multiple classes, or possibly not even coming into school. With our new AP teams, that's associate principal and assistant principal, teams with counselors this year, we changed the administrative structure so that one AP was working with 2 or 2.5 counselors, depending on how you count it, to support about 400 students each, where before there was 5 counselors and an AP and a dean working with 800 students. So we created much smaller teams to provide more support for students. And I would say that the feedback there in terms of knowing our students, supporting our students, and really focusing on engagement through attendance has been pretty positive. There's still work to do. I want to echo something that Jim said in terms of how teachers have stepped up this year. We really are asking teachers to do more based on our student needs. If I just talk to you about hallway behavior, bathroom behavior, and not blaming the students, but just where they are in their lives and what they need in terms of support, that requires just more thought, care, and time on all educators' parts. And I would say the teachers have really stepped up to help in the hallways, outside their classrooms, meetings with students, and providing support. So that's also helped a lot. Our school and community events have been amazing this year. I can list several of them to you, and then I'll probably forget over 100. We had our Holy celebration, which you see up there and was noted before recently. We had a homecoming dance of over 500 students in December. We had our student basketball game where the gym was packed. We had overflowing athletic event fan spectatorship this year. Our performing arts, our over 100 clubs. There's always something going on at the high school. Quiz Bowl, today there was a table tennis tournament. Tomorrow we're gonna have PE and athletic day. It's really an energized, alive place. And it's great to be there and see that. In terms of culturally responsive practices, also, this is why sometimes I don't like going after Jim. To echo what Jim said, we have 7 culturally responsive teacher leaders, and they too have been engaged in that district-wide work. They studied the book, Zaretta Hammond's book, as Jim noted, and they've also done some professional learning with our staff. The staff mapped one of their classes of students and looked at those students' learning abilities on a scale of dependent to independent, and how we teachers could help support students to move more towards independence. I'm gonna look at some of my notes here. We also have 5 seed leaders at the high school, and they're helping teachers in terms of leading their own teachers' personal identity and growth centered on equity and diversity. SEED stands for Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity. And that's training that all of our educators, as you know, are required to have by 2024. And we're looking forward to all of that work continuing in classrooms and with clubs through both of those teacher leadership groups and all of the staff. I would say overall, teacher leadership in our school has been at an all-time high this year. I've shared with you our culture responsive teacher leaders and our SEED leaders. We also have our advisory teacher leaders. We have peer leaders in every department who are helping with the course leveling work. At our faculty meetings, we break into faculty advisory groups where we have one member of every department to talk about the professional learning that we're learning, or even community building exercises. And our faculty is really excited about going into their own faculty advisory groups and talking with that group that they've gotten much closer with this year and have bridged connections across departments. If you remember last year, one of the things that I noted is coming into the high school, and most people told me this, so it wasn't a surprise that I recognized it last year in my first year in the high school. Being such a large high school, it was quite departmentalized. And so teachers are really working on making connections across departments. And some of those teacher leadership initiatives have really helped with that. All right, I'm gonna move on to advisory. All right, we had our advisory teacher leaders come and present at the beginning of the school year. We have 4 of them. Their goal was simple for us this year, to create a cohesive community that encourages students to connect with peers and staff. I'll just describe the structure a bit more, just to make sure that everyone remembers. We have about 8 to 12 students in each of our advisory groups. They are mixed grade levels, 9th through 12th grades, so about 2 9th graders, 2 10th graders, etc. I know my advisory has, I think, 10 students in it, so a couple of the grades have 3 students. We meet every Monday for 20 minutes. It is really important to our group that we have routines and recurring formats. And so we'll usually start with an opener. After, we lost an hour or whatever, what do we call that? Spring Forward Day. We ask, like, hey, did you like that? Did you like losing an hour? Or, how was that for you? So something kind of basic just to open with. We usually then have a discussion that's something relevant to the students. How did term 3 end for you? What do you think about course levels? Hey, have you noticed more students cleaning up in the cafeteria, and what can you do to help with that? Some things that are important about advisory, that it is technology free, and that we sit in a circle so that we can look at each other and connect. Overall, advisory has been pretty successful. I think we would say we're heading in the right direction. And some statistics we have are, in our first semester, 92% of our students had no unexcused absences in advisory. And we'll take that as a success. In December, 83% of our students reported that they had met someone new in advisory. So we were happy with those connections starting to be formed. Okay, I am now going to go into a detailed course leveling discussion. Peter, you're okay with me moving into that, or should I open it up for questions on either one of the first two? Let's go. Got it. Okay. Get going. All right. Okay. So our goal in course leveling, and we have spent a large amount of time on, or a significant amount of time on this year, is to provide increasingly equitable access to advanced level course opportunities and a broader range of learning and social interactions for our students. If I were to briefly describe to you this work prior to this year, it would be this. In the high school, we have traditionally 4 levels of classes. Later in the slide, you'll see them exactly spelled out again. CP1, College Prep 1, is our most supported class. CP, College Prep, is the next one. AE is the 3rd level, Accelerated Enriched, and our usually most advanced level is either called AP, Advanced Placement, or Honors. Over time, our departments have adjusted that course leveling structure to best meet the needs of students. In the 90s, the English department moved from 4 to 3 levels. 2010, English did the same thing for 12th grade. World language, with input from the community, modified to have fewer levels in their course level structure over the course of the last few years. Science, with input from the community as well, modified their level structure to 3 levels in all of their levels. Environmental is mostly for 9th graders, biology 10th, chemistry 11th, and physics 12th, and APs can be entry levels. And as of last year, that change was made. In the fall of 2021, as Peter mentioned, central office and high school leadership sat down and discussed course levels at the high school. Decision was made to move forward with creating a plan to reduce course levels over the course of the next few years. And the goals were to provide more access and opportunities and to create a broader range of learning and social interactions. In recent history, there have been shifts in our instruction. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when that's happened. That's an evolution. That's how education works. And some of those changes in instruction focus on more choice for students, more student-centered instruction, and that, like I said, has been an evolution across education and at AB. Our current override process for students to get into higher level courses is far more flexible than in the past, and both this increased choice and our changing instruction have already begun the process of students choosing to level up themselves. So if you look at the numbers of our students in our AE and our advanced level courses, you'll see that they're much higher percentages than in previous years. If we move to this school year, 2022 to 2023, our current landscape in our school and in area schools and what colleges are seeing in education is that learning is much more about problem solving, collaboration, and critical thinking in a variety of settings. This is in comparison to traditional education, which was much more rigorous in terms of content delivery. In the fall this year, we set out, as Peter stated, to create a plan for the long term, because we had been doing different pieces of looking at our course levels and reducing course levels, as I just said, in world language, science, English. And we wanted to make a plan long-term for the community and students to have some input in information about. As Peter said again, we had a committee that was members from each department and department leaders that met weekly. And when I say departments, I mean departments that you would normally think of in addition to counseling and special education. We made a long-term plan that, of course, we want to share with you now. I do want to say the members of that committee deserve an enormous amount of appreciation for their thoughtful work, the giving of their time, and their incredible expertise. And our work is exponentially better than all of us individually because we were involved in that dynamic process over the course of this year. So we clarified our program of study for next year, which is set, and we made a long-term proposal, which again, you'll hear about tonight. I want to point out very clearly at the third bullet that our plan for the future is evolving. So we have a proposal that is not set in stone, and we want to hear feedback, and we want to monitor it over time with data and surveys and feedback to adjust to best meet the needs of our students. Between now and next November, we'll be listening to community and student feedback. I want to be really clear that the changes we're proposing are not to eliminate levels. They're not to unlevel, and they're not to de-level. Instead, we're proposing a structure to provide more opportunities that overall reduces levels. This structure is a model based in educational research, feedback from our students over time, and is not that dissimilar to what other high schools and colleges are doing and looking for. Again, this is a long-term proposal, and we fully expect it to evolve over time. All right. I'm going to start now with some of the reasons why we are looking to share with you this long-term proposal. So this first slide is a group of quotes from our senior survey. I'm going to describe the survey and what's on the left in a minute. I'm going to just ask that you read through the quotes for about 30 seconds, the ones that are in the middle of the page. So I'll just read the first one. The competition academically is toxic. You feel shamed if you take anything but AP or honors classes. And honestly, I felt embarrassed for taking CP classes. I will say very clearly that these are representative quotes from our senior survey given in 2019, 21, and 22. We didn't give the survey in 2020 due to the pandemic. One reason that also illustrates that it is representative is on the left in the vertical box. Every year, question is asked and about why students feel discriminated or excluded, and students report that the top reason they felt excluded or discriminated at school was because because of course levels. And the percentages are there, 50%, 63%, and 62%. That's the top reason of all the different reasons that were available. We feel that a rigid leveling system can have a stark impact on students' social and emotional learning. And especially now, we know that it is important for students to feel balanced, emotionally, seen, heard, and feel a sense of belonging in order to learn. And so this is a motivator for us. Another piece that contributes to our reasoning for looking at reducing course levels is this data. So if you look across the top, you'll see categories of students who have been historically marginalized. And on the left, you'll see the descriptions that go along with the percentages. So if you look at Black and Latinx students, the first column, 10% of our student population identify as Black or Latinx. Our percentage of enrollments in honors and AP classes of Black and Latinx students is only 4%. And then in our lowest or most supported class, CP1 classes, the percentage of enrollments of Black and Latinx students is 35%. You can go across the chart to see percentages for students who are on individualized education plans, are multilingual learners, economically disadvantaged students, and students who enter AB after the 8th grade. We believe that these groups have overrepresentation in our lowest level groups and underrepresentation in our most advanced groups. You can find more demographic data if you click in the link at the bottom. And I will say that 2 points to this. We unfortunately believe that when students are in the lower level courses, CP1 and CP, they face the reality of little opportunity to move out of those levels. When we look at in our math data, 87% of students who are in the CP1 track or level, at in 9th grade remain by 12th grade. And those are the curriculum in those courses and the level that they attain is far less than in the advanced level classes. I also believe, based on our overall academic data nationally, SAT scores, MCAS scores, that many of our students could be provided more opportunities. All right. Wanted to provide some research for you. So we have 4 example articles here, and you can click on any of them at your leisure, and there's more at the bottom link where the research is noted at the bottom. I will say that the field of education has extensively been researching this topic, the topic of levels, and overall, research shows fewer levels and tracks does benefit all students with increased opportunities and more diverse learning environments. I will point out that when you look at some of the articles that people sometimes present as counter to fewer levels or tracks, there will often be a reason given that tracks or levels or reducing them or taking them away will not in the end have an effect on the instruction, or perhaps the positive data that we're seeing from fewer levels and tracks is due to other shifts, such as shifts in instruction, instead of the de-leveling. I happen to believe that those 2 things go hand in hand, but even if you don't believe that, I'll be very clear that our program or our plan necessarily and must include instructional shifts and collaboration and professional learning for our staff and even our students in terms of how to make sure that the instruction is effective. So instruction will also have to shift. I want to make sure that it's pointed out that area and peer schools are also doing this work. We talked to 16 area schools and 6 high-performing schools outside Massachusetts in the Northeast. Almost all are engaged in some sort of reconsideration and implementation of reduced levels for the same reasons. Each school has a pretty specific plan to their own school, so individualized and at various implementation stages. I talked to such schools as Wayland, Concord Carlisle, LS, Lexington. One example of one of the schools, they're completely unleveled in the 9th grade English and history. Their math is moving from 3 to 2 levels to be consistent, and because they believe it will best meet the needs of students from the middle school to the high school. And in world language, they're considering combining levels as well. That's one example. Another example, another school has 1 level for social studies across all of their grades, 2 levels in English, 3 in science, and 4 in math, with consideration that 9th grade math will be unleveled in the future. One more school has moved their courses to multi-level courses, which is an interesting concept where you can have 2 levels in the same course chosen by the students. This is to point out that we are not alone in considering this work for the benefit of students. All right, here are 2 stated and explicit goals, which I've already stated. I'll just reiterate, students will have increased access, opportunities, and choice to study advanced level coursework. Students will have access to a broader range of learning and social interactions that will better prepare them for today. We want to measure these goals over time. We also want to make sure that we balance this with supporting all of our students' needs. Okay. In each presentation I've done, I've switched the order of these 2 slides. So I'm just going to show them to you really quickly. 4-year proposed plan and our 2023-2024 plan. So next year's plan and the long-term plan. The long-term plan, again, is our proposal that we are going to be asking for feedback from over time. And like Peter said, making a final recommendation in November. Just give you a minute to look at that, and then I'll comment on a few things. Okay. So you'll see each grade level across the top and each subject down the side. You'll see the year that the proposal is suggested will reach its culmination underneath each department title. One outcome of this plan is that there will be mobility between all levels from year to year. So I know sometimes we've thought about, okay, well, if I take this course, then what will happen? What is the tree diagram that's going to show me which classes I can then take? In this proposal, we are hoping that there is endless opportunities for mobility. And there's possible exceptions in the bottom right there with some math courses. I would like to just note that science here has 3 levels, and math, you'll see, has more levels as students are in the higher grades. And then overall, you'll see that, for example, if you look at our social studies in 9th grade, there's a world history and a world history honors course. I'm probably going to come back to this slide in a minute. I'd like to show you next year's plan first. So this is the first step in that longer-term proposal. On the far right, you'll see our traditional levels. And underneath it, you'll again see the reduced level example, world history honors. The light orange represents the courses that will reduce levels next year. So we have 3 courses that will be different this year from last year. World history in the 9th grade, English 2 in the 10th grade, and our psychology. This is next year's plan. You'll notice we still have traditional levels in history in 10th and 11th grade, and in math for all the grades. And then again, this is our more long-term plan. All right, I'm going to continue moving, so I'm sure time is not on our side here. Okay. Want to make sure that it's noted that the concept of leveling up is important in this plan. And I'd like to share a little bit about what that means. We want to work to maintain our high standards by providing increased opportunity for application, critical thinking, problem solving. I'm sure there's going to be questions about the plan. If I were to, though, go back and just talk specifically about, let's just go back to the world history example. The world history in 9th grade. That world history class that is not the honors level will be a world history class with no level. So we're not leveling it CP or AE. It's very hard to map an old system, our old system of levels, onto this system, because we will be leveling up and scaffolding for all students in those classes so that the classes will be as accessible as possible for all students in there. We plan to weight the classes, that world history class that's not the world history honors, at the 4.5 WGPA level. And I'm not going to get into explaining that too much, but if you know about grade point average, an A usually correlates to a 4.0, and because we believe our curriculum is already at a very high level, we believe that it is appropriate, both educationally and ethically, to weight those classes, the world history, at the 4.5 level. World history honors would be at the 5.0 level. We talked to colleges. We reached out to 100 of the 100 most attended colleges of our graduates, and we received information from over 60. This is what colleges said. The numbers of levels is not as important as long as our school profile is clear. Typically, our AE level has been weighted the same as CP by colleges, and that was unfortunately a disservice to our students who were in the AE level. Colleges emphasize the importance of outlining our levels on the school profile. And then some people have asked about WGPA, the weighted grade point average. Many colleges do recalculate on their own, but not all. So it's important for us to consider that when we're making changes or determinations about our WGPA and GPA. I've been surprised and not surprised that many of the community's responses and questions have been about desire and concern about supporting teachers, and how will teachers be able to handle this increased workload and meet all of the students' needs. And I wanted to outline some of the professional learning that we've been doing that has been tailored to teacher needs, and also needs to continue growing and evolving, because our teachers too are asking for professional learning, time, collaboration, and support. So last year, specifically, we identified areas that staff wanted to work on this year. They're noted there: scaffolding, differentiation, choice, reflection, and questioning. We then planned our professional learning this year to focus on meeting those needs. If you look at what we did this year for our November Professional Learning Day, all of our faculty and department meetings and our early release days were tailored around those topics. Beyond the professional learning days, we've had ongoing peer coaching. Every department has an instructional leader in addition to the department leader to help with this work. We've created multiple focus groups to talk about anything from alternative programs, attendance, to support for multilingual learners, all of the things that are very important and needed in terms of student supports. We have many organic working groups within departments. We have employed outside speakers to provide targeted professional learning for us. Next year, we're going to go with the same plan, though we need different supports next year. So we're asking our staff what they need. It's important that we get support around multilingual learners. Our teachers have asked for subject and class-specific collaboration time, and there's a focus on our instructional practices, professional learning. I know the math department just had a whole afternoon focused on the book, Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics. We're focused on student feedback and scaffolding techniques. I know that our science department has had professional learning on the next generation standards, the NGSS standards, and I know that all of our peer leaders had coaching around peer coaching. So really specific and targeted professional learning is what we want to provide, continue providing. All right, I know this is a lot. I want to share quickly some examples of data collected to date. So this year, our more heterogeneously grouped classes, our Environmental 9, we have 3 levels, Environmental 9 Honors, and Environmental 9 AP. I am just, when I speak right now, speaking about the more heterogeneously grouped class. Again, it's not unleveled or de-leveled because there are 2 other levels, but I'm talking about the group now that does not have CP and CP1 separated out. And that's for both Environmental 9 and English 9. You'll note that overall, school-wide, our Q1 average last year to this year, so Q1 means quarter 1, was 89% and 88%. So last year 89%, this year 81%. Students in CP1, our most supported classes last year at quarter 1, earned 81% overall in their classes. We looked at which students would have been in CP1 classes but were not because the classes were offered in a more heterogeneously grouped way this year, and those students are earning an overall 83% in those classes this year. Additionally, if you look at our Environmental Science 9 data, the quarter 1 and quarter 2 grades indicate the students who would have been in CP and CP1 are accessing the curriculum at slightly higher levels than last year. I can share this. The specific data is linked in the presentation. The percentages are around, well, I have them here, 88 to actually 88 this year for this group of students. And last year for quarter 2, our CP1 students were earning overall 80, and our CP students 86. So this year 88, which is slightly higher. Similarly, in English, our quarter 1 average for students who would have been placed in CP1 courses was 84%. School-wide student survey. Students in more heterogeneously grouped classes answered favorably in comparison to students in the rest of the classes for these 3 categories. Teachers in all my classes provide instruction, class material support. Doing well in the class depends on how much effort I put in. Doing well in class depends on how well I use learning strategies in each class. Themes from teachers. Teachers overall reported success in terms of working with students in these more heterogeneously grouped classes. They, though, asked for professional learning around teaching more heterogeneous courses. They need help supporting students with high needs. They would like support in working with multilingual learners. General education support needs are also there, and alternative programming to provide targeted support for students. So it's important for us to recognize that and pay attention. Okay. As Peter said, we've been giving surveys, and I want to share with you initial themes from those surveys. Again, we have not had the time to completely quantitatively analyze all of the survey responses, yet we will, and we will share that with you. The designer of the survey, that was me, created a survey that has a lot of qualitative answers, and so we need to really code that well and then provide for you more quantitative results. Overall, from the community survey, which we only had 105 responses, you'll see the concerns on the left and the opportunities on the right. So concerns noted: reduced choice, increased stress, and worry that classes would be taught to the middle or the low end. Noted opportunities: less gatekeeping, different and diverse peer interactions, and increased mobility and less tracking. I'll let you read through the common community questions, and then we'll move on to the next set of themes from the student survey. Okay. I don't think we'll read through all of these. I'll let you do that at your leisure. We had 165 students respond in grades 9 through 11. Note there are 1,232 9th through 11th graders, so we certainly need to get more feedback. I'll read the first one and the last one because they're slightly different viewpoints. I think that having 2 course levels increased the interactions between students from different backgrounds. Since there are only 2 options instead of 3, more people who have previously been in different levels will now meet in class, which will lead to student learning about each other's cultures. Having diversity in each classroom is important because it's more reflective of society, so it's important to have at high school. The last comment: I worry that because AE is taken away, there's no longer a middle ground that was used to support students who fit in between CP and honors. AE, as described by teachers, is an honors class with less workload. Will there be extra support given to AE students in honors classes and CP students in potentially more difficult classes? So these are excellent questions, and to Molly's point before, we have only briefly begun sharing all of this with students, and certainly more information, description, and discussions, feedback are needed. Here are key questions from students. Are you okay with me moving forward? Okay, it's important to us to monitor progress and then have the plan evolve in that way. So we're going to continue to do that in the way that you just saw the data that I shared. In terms of student engagement and academic performance, we're going to collect grades by term in all courses and share that with you. We want to look at teachers, special educator, and general support teacher feedback, and we want to look at the attendance records. We want to look at what students are saying in surveys and focus groups around challenges and supports, especially in the more heterogeneously grouped courses. And we want to examine how they are reflecting growth mindset from their classes in the surveys that we're giving. We want to, of course, examine our standardized assessment results in terms of MCAS, AP exams, etc. It's important to us because it's our goal to look at student accessibility into higher level courses and also look at the demographics of our levels, focusing on a reduction in that opportunity gap. Again, as I've said numerous times, we want to have ongoing evaluation and assessment of this plan to inform our future work. We plan to gather data and feedback now through the fall and make a final recommendation by November 1st. Here's some additional resources if you would like them. I'd like to point out that at our second community forum on March 21st, we were not able, in the amount of time we had, to answer all the questions. And what we did was we saved all of those questions and we answered them all in written form. And they are in that second document, the FAQ. We added at the end of that frequently asked questions document, we added all of the answers to the community forum questions that we were not able to answer that night. Okay, that was a lot. I will just say overall, I do believe we've had a very successful year in the high school due to the students and the staff. Thank you for listening tonight. I really appreciate it. Questions or comments?
Thank you, that was wonderful. This is how this is gonna go down, friends, okay? Because it's 8:45, okay? I'm gonna give this 15 minutes for us. I'm gonna give this 15 minutes for audience. Okay, we good with that? Let's go, Tessa.
So I have 2 meetings left. I will not take all of the time at all, but I have a lot of thoughts about this. I appreciate everything that you're doing. It is everything that I would do. It is everything that I think brings this back to, like, you just need to look at those first 2 slides. I don't know how we could not do something. They're disgusting. The data saying how many kids are on IEPs and in honors classes versus CP1 classes is disgusting. That's not your fault at all. But when I read community feedback on Facebook or in some of these surveys, the concern is, what will my honors students be missing out on when all of these low students are brought into classes? And the idea that disability is somehow related to intelligence is, or EL status or socioeconomic, disadvantages, like the fact that any of these high needs populations are related to overall intelligence is a tough pill to swallow, that so much of our community feels that that's the case. And so when I read about this de-leveling and what people's concerns are, it's about, mixing the kids. So I will say the most positive courses we have experienced at the high school have been unleveled. And unfortunately, those don't happen until senior year. So several courses are offered in English senior year, and it is the first time my student has been in a heterogeneous class with students that they went to elementary school with, but haven't seen since. And I think that this concern that high school teachers can't manage heterogeneous classes, K through 6 and 7 and 8 all teach heterogeneous classes. I am a second grade teacher. I have a student in my class who has an IQ of 64 and a student in my class who has an IQ of 140. They're both on IEPs. They both are learning in my classroom at the same time, and I have to teach them. And that is the reality for every single teacher in our district. And so the idea that high school teachers somehow can't manage that when all the rest of our teachers are managing it is just wrong. So I think it's ludicrous. So I think that we have had countless educators come to this table and present to us and talk about these unbelievably exciting courses that they are pursuing that match our goals of equity and diversity and inclusion. And they have all said, we have a hard time getting students to enroll because we don't offer an honors option. And I know you glossed over the GPA piece of it, but kids are taking it so that they get the weighted GPA. And it is totally ridiculous because there's kids taking honors classes that have no business taking honors classes for the weighted GPA. And I don't really feel like, my personal opinion is that until we get rid of that, you're going to continue to have this divide because there's going to be kids and families and community members that feel that they're going to get into whatever end game because they have this higher weighted GPA. And anyone who has a senior and who has gone through the college process will tell you that it is a toss-up. And a lot of those kids are not getting into those classes anyway, and they're working their butts off, and they're doing all those things for what? And yet, you have this, and so you have this divide. Those quotes are real. Like, that kids who have been in honors classes the whole time are not socializing or talking to or, engaging with students that have not been in honors classes. And that is a reality of AB. And the culture is toxic in terms of that, whatchamacallit, that competitiveness. That's what I was going to say. So I will be done, Kyra. I have said my piece. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much. I think most of the faculty would agree with you about weighted GPA. I think that is something that we want to think about and discuss over the course of the next few years. I would point out that we are hoping to help with that a bit because we do believe our courses that are not the honors level courses are still at a very high level, and we want to offer that weight at a 4.5, where I think typically it would be at a 4.0 at another school. And I hear you. I would also say about teachers, I think teachers are ready to engage overall for the most part in this work. And I appreciate what you're saying about other schools. And I will also say that high school teachers have an incredible amount of work with 5 different classes and sometimes over 100 students on their caseload. And so coordinating within teams for individual students can become very complicated in such a large building. And part of what I believe my responsibility is to support teachers in terms of figuring that out.
No, I hear you, and I totally appreciate that.
Well, this is my last meeting, so I do want to say something. I'm 100% in favor of this. I agree with almost everything Tessa said. I'm not sure what I don't agree with, but I can't say everything. The most important thing to me is that all students get to access whatever level that student wants to access. The idea that I know for my kids that if you did not have a 97 in history, you couldn't take AP psychology. It is ridiculous. It's, every single student has a different interest and skill, and they should be able to access any course. And I understand the math courses, but they should be able to access any level of any course without having to go and beg a teacher to prove that they're good enough or get their parents to on the right date and make sure you don't miss the deadline and then go in and interview. Those kinds of roadblocks, they should all be gone. So that's my passion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're working to provide more flexibility in terms of that. And I think the course level system also reflects that.
So one of the first things that I find really interesting is this differentiation between course leveling and tracking. And I think tracking is the key part to watch here because it is not necessarily the number or types of levels that we have. It's the track that you end up being, quote unquote, locked into over time. So I really appreciate that part. The second part I would say is that we have to be really careful, I hear, around our school profile, particularly for the kids who are in the high school and who are going to be in the high school through this transition period. Because as much as weighted GPA may or may not affect an individual, there is some minutia in there that will be challenging for those students who are in as part of this transition and may be in a class that may have a higher weighted GPA in the future. So I think that's really important. And then the last thing that I want to say, I'm fully in support of this. I think what is really, really important here is to remember that your status, whether or not you're on an IEP, whether or not you're a person of color, whether or not you come from a different socioeconomic status, should not be a determinator of your ability in school, just as the fact that you're a man or a woman or a black woman should not be the determinator, or your mental health status should not be a determinator of your future earnings. And we already know that in our country that that's a problem. So if we can start to root that out in the high school, I think we're going to be in a really good place.
I also have a lot of things I could say, but I will save that for the next time this comes around. I think that we all know that teaching a skill to another person is a really great way to cement that understanding. So I think the peer-to-peer learning model has a lot of potential for a lot of good value there. Looking into this, I saw that there was some mixed results in the data, but a lot of it just came down to making sure those supports are there. And my only question is, knowing that this is a midpoint in the process, this is an evolving process, but there is a change coming up for next year, well, I don't want kids getting trapped in a track, as I had experience with. I I assume there's still guidance to help kids know where they maybe their skills are best placed.
Yes, absolutely, with counselors, teachers, and department leaders. And I've been pretty amazed at how well supported that is for students in such a large school here. And that will continue.
So a lot of information I won't be able to capture. So some of them, most of them I won't be able to capture, but I just have some thought. One comment is, looks like in the end of the slide, there is a lot of like concern about the support from the teacher. So you also laid out some plans to enable, to strengthen their part. So I wonder, actually that's a question probably to Peter, so all the rest of the school committee is, what is the impact on the budget? That's one.
Yeah, I think, one of the activities we go through every year is determining what priorities we're looking at. And as we determine the priorities, that is typically where we're going to have the resources that we already had in the budget set aside for professional learning get allocated to the priority of the year. It doesn't mean that there's a higher impact necessarily. It means that we're steering the funds that we do have toward that priority. So, I know Joanie and Deb have already been talking about using the district resources and, how do we make sure that we're providing the support we need to educators and funding the professional learning that they need. This is accounted for already in the budget for what we have plans for next year. So, this is certainly not going to increase next year's budget. I think, it's not really a class size issue per se. I mean, in any environment, you don't want your class sizes to start to grow disproportionate to the needs of the learners in the class. So, whether or not we had 2 levels or 4 levels, we're still going to be concerned about class size at some point. So I think, there's certainly professional learning that has to take place, and that means we're allocating the funds to the resources we need, but it's from the same pot of money that we had.
Well, okay, so I just wanted to, so the second one is, so I thought of the changing the levels for the, you have it's kind of a pretty cautious, I would say, right? It's kind of from year by year. But I also saw this kind of try to change pretty much all the classes, like science, social study, whatever. So is that, so I saw your, say, the plan is kind of we wanted to try, then observe the data, then do adjustment, whatever that, right? So, but so I was wondering whether this is kind of, try to change every classes, topics, at the same time is kind of a little bit aggressive or not? Maybe try one first, then see how is it going to impact on that. So that's
yes. I do think that is what we want to do. And like this year, we've been analyzing what happened in English 9 and Environmental 9 very, very carefully, because those were the 2 classes we reduced levels in this year. And next year, with the 3 classes that we're going to do that with, we'll want to analyze that as well. And we'll continue to do that to make sure that our student needs are met. Does that make sense?
I think what could be confusing in this is you see what's happening now and next year, and then it says, what's our 4-year plan? Every year is a different plan in between.
Right.
You're just seeing now, and then you're seeing the end result. But it does, essentially what they're looking at doing, I think, is as students move through the system, whatever freshmen might start with, that pattern just moves with them along the way. So it kind of graduates out with the classes over 4 years. Is that fairly accurate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I'm going to step down. So I fully support the idea of the increase the mobility between the classes over the years. So that's I would say that's definitely that's a good thing. But I thought also like I would be curious about your definition about the diversity environment, right? So I thought a multi-level reflect the diversity in some sense, because extreme case I would love to have this one student for each customized one level, right? So that, that's extreme diversity, right? So I was wondering, so it looks like kind of we are blaming the levels. I thought that's kind of it's the structure, but increase accessibility or flexibility, that's a key, right? It's not about the removing it. This levels, all the courses are available actually to everybody, right? But I also get the point, Amy, like it's very hard to move, right? It's kind of, I would say that's definitely the low-hanging fruit we should try first, right?
Yes, unfortunately, I think that most CP1 and CP courses are preparing students for the next year's CP1 and CP courses. Instead of a student in a CP1 course or a CP course having the option to choose all 4 levels the following year.
I would say a great starting point to look at some of the research around this is the first link that Joanie provided in her presentation with Kim Marshall, and it's a link to a meta-analysis of all of the different research on this topic. And it talks about some of the reasons why people believe having more course levels is better for students and some of the reasons why people believe having fewer levels. And then it talks about the different data that go into that. So I would just steer people to look at that as a good first resource.
And I just want to add, this research is, what, over 20 years old? We've been doing research on heterogeneous classrooms for, what, 30 years? An educator tell me. You know, I graduated from high school in '02. Heterogeneous classrooms were in effect in the high school that I went to. The fact that we're doing this in 2023 at this high school, and having this much of a level of conversation about it amongst highly educated, not foolish people is extraordinary. This is extraordinary. I'm trying to hold it together. And the fact that we're gonna go slow is pretty extraordinary. We are at least 20 years behind because of the insistence on tracking. There is a difference between levels make sense, and tracking, which doesn't make sense. Moving this way makes sense. There's a lot of candidates in this room. Some of y'all are gonna sit in these seats. Don't get in the way of this, because this is important. This brings this school district and this high school, which is supposedly one of the best high schools in the state, into 2023. We are behind our neighbors. We are behind other states. We are no better because we're behind. So if you're a candidate and you want to go to a forum and you want to be cute about something, don't get cute about this, because this is too important. Don't get in the way of it. And if you got questions, come see me, because I'm an educator. I did this, and I taught this, and I studied this at Harvard, and I can tell you how it works. Don't get in the way, okay? Public comment for 15 minutes. No, I gave it the 15 minutes. 15 minutes, let's go. Tori.
Victoria Campbell, 477 Mass Ave. Thank you, Principal Dean, for that update. I saw the first community presentation, and I've gotten to read a lot about this, and I think you provided a lot more context that helped me wrap my head around this. Kyra, yes to all of that. So I am completely behind this. All the things you all have just said, right behind it. What I'm thinking about right now is how do we communicate this? How do we get the community on board? And my wondering is, would it be possible to produce a sample lesson? I remember when the math team from the junior high came up with the Desmos lesson, y equals mx plus b, I'm there. And I don't do math, except for when it's budget. Can we do that with this? Can we show what a signature class lesson looks like? Can we show those supports? Can we show how the students who are wondering, what class am I gonna take? And am I gonna be able to handle this class? And how am I gonna be able to take it with kids like my own kid who is in the occupational development program, but yet hungers to take a lot of these science classes? It's totally possible. I believe we can do this, but we gotta show people so that when they're responding they know what they're responding to. They have actual examples. They can point to it instead of just talking about a nebulous concept that I don't think we all understand fully. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's quite insightful. I do think it's very hard for people to imagine mapping the 4-level system onto a less leveled system and what that looks like. And we can talk all day about what scaffolds are, and if you're writing an essay, and instead of the teacher just saying write the essay, what it would mean to provide some of those scaffolds in class. And many students have experienced that. And yet I do agree, and I've done that in my previous school in terms of having model lessons that can show and actually you can experience what it's like. So I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
So I have a 10th grader and I have a 8th grader. Is it on? Am I good? Yeah. I can hear me, right? So I'll come at this first as a parent, right? And I think I'm in favor of it with a lot of reservations. And I think my daughter, and I said this publicly at a forum, maybe I got cute, maybe I didn't, I don't know. But I'm hesitant about how it's being communicated. Tessa, you said the first slide is gross, but I haven't heard how this is addressing anything. And Kyra, I stood right over here and asked you for resources on how to learn more of this. So I did ask you as a candidate, and you gave me nothing. So you said I don't have anything. I'm learning myself. That was a comment you gave me. So I'm a little, I don't know. That was a little awkward, the statement just now. But my comment, I don't necessarily need well, I have two more comments about. I just don't necessarily need an answer about or response. My first comment is we're very quick to point out how different and one of the benefits of our district is how diverse it is, right? But then we're not acknowledging that, and we're not acknowledging the demographics of multi-language learners and a large Asian population in any of this, right? And there are demographics of people that move to this district for a very strict education, a very hard education, right? It's very important for them to have a very accelerated education. So it's being dismissive to those people groups, demographics, with some of these comments. That comments are gross, this is that, that's dismissive, and that's unnecessary. And the other thing I've noticed is that our elementary schools are leveling in math. Gates, and I mean, you can shake your head no, but if they're not, the MCAS scores for Gates and for Conan are way different in math than they are in.
They take RSM.
Okay.
I actually don't have to do that part.
Yeah, but
there is still, and I just said it, a
Yeah.
difference between leveling
Yeah.
and tracking. That's the difference. It's actually a
Okay.
pedagogical
Yeah.
It's a pedagogical difference. I am dismissing the idea that we have to, because of a very rooted and frankly old-fashioned way of thinking, where a student can never move from a level because they've been in a place since this grade and for some reason they cannot be mobile. That is not okay. That is
I agree with that part.
a 30-year-old
That's the tracking
concept.
part, and I agree with you very much on that.
So
Yeah.
that's where we are. And
Okay.
so the research is actually right
Sure.
behind you on a beautiful
Yeah.
slide.
Okay.
I'm happy to give you any other research that you want to, or we can go out and have another cup of coffee.
Yeah, let's do that. But they are taking RSM because they want the hard education later on in their high school career.
So AB is offering a hard
Okay.
curriculum.
But don't
We
tell.
actually
But
just
then
heard that.
you don't be
Jason,
dismissive of
I
them.
am the chair and I am talking.
Sorry, you're right. I apologize.
So, we are providing a hard curriculum, and you are right. There are people who come here because they want a particular merit-based education. The way that we deliver it with a tracked system is not necessarily pedagogically helpful for any student. The best of us, or those of us who need a little bit of extra support. What we're trying to do is deliver that excellent education that people here move to come here for, and give it in a way that students can access it at any level and move at every level. The difference, Jason, is not the levels, but the tracking. Listen to what I said. Levels and tracking. I'm going to give you one more second. And
No,
then
that's
we're
it.
gonna keep
I just think, and I agree with the tracking and leveling thing. I just feel like we're being dismissive, and we need to tighten up the messaging on this and show how this is going to help and exactly what you mean. But I understand the difference between tracking and leveling. I've had a lot of conversations with this in the last couple months. Yes, I know that a lot of people don't. So, thank you.
I heard your comment. So, y'all can communicate this differently, but don't stop it. Sit down.
Well, yeah, I agree. I'm trying.
Communicate it differently, communicate it effectively, and then keep going.
Okay, so I want to provide a student view to this matter because I feel like we're the ones being affected here. And so I know a lot of the concern with like kind of taking out the AE level, even though it's considered at a CP weightage. I think a lot of the concern is that those, I personally have dropped down from Geo Honors to Geo AE. And I don't think I would have done so if there wasn't an AE option. I think I would have continued to struggle and get bad grades in Geo Honors because I would have been concerned about my weighted GPA. And I think that's a concern among many students. And I think that maybe we need to address this and maybe we need to educate students more about this and like how this, like the statistics and the logic behind this before implementing this really, because I don't think students fully understand this. And I agree, I think students should be able to access the classes they need and the classes they want. But students are worried that it's not going to help their learning, and I think that students in the AE level are worried that they're going to be recommended to a higher course that they won't be able to be successful in. And successful means getting an A, and that could like lead to GPA matters. And so I think that's one of the main concerns among students. I think another concern is that having only 2 levels would actually create more separation. I know that this has been talked a lot within the student body. People argue that with 3 levels, people from honors who take like mixed honors and mixed AE, they interact with people who are taking AE and CP courses more. And so I think students are worried that by taking out the AE level, like there's going to be a greater divide between honors students and CP students, because those who want to take honors classes will probably try to stick to honors, and those who aren't ready for honors or don't believe they're ready for honors will try to stick to the CP classes. And so people believe that there's going to be like a greater divide instead of this mix that is occurring within the AE level. And from my experience from dropping from Geo Honors to Geo AE, I was actually able to communicate and talk to more kids who are taking AE and CP classes. I also started talking to more sophomores because it was a mixed grade class, whereas in Geo Honors, I was only talking to kids who were in the same grade as me. And so I think those are some of the main student concerns, and I just wanted to present that and leave that up for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that students, we need to include you more in the conversation, and I want to apologize for that not having happened so far. And we set our program of studies in December, and now we need to involve the students in more of what we're doing for our next deadline through or up until November 1st. I will say that the WGPA, we're weighting the signature levels at that AE level in the way that we hope colleges will recognize it now, numerically, where they did not recognize the AE label before. They counted it as CP when they were recalculating. And we want to definitely watch the different groups of students who are in honors and signature courses for exactly what you're talking about, because we certainly want different groups of people to interact and have social interactions and a wide range of people and students in all of the learning environments. So thank you.
Rohan, you get the last word.
Okay. So I agree with a lot of what Diksha said. I would also like to add that I am currently taking a heterogeneous English class, and I really, really enjoy it. I also have peer mentored in the past 2 years in a 9th grade heterogeneous Spanish class. And so I think AB has a really horrific elitism problem because of things like ours. Like, I was an RSM kid, right? Like, I'm not gonna lie, I did RSM, I did Kumon. There was a lot of stuff that I felt like I had to do, and there was not even pressure from my parents, but from the community around me to get an A versus a B. And so being in a heterogeneous English class was probably the closest, the best sort of class community that I've ever had. And so I agree that for STEM, like, if I didn't have the ability to drop out of one of the STEM classes I was in, I would have really struggled my junior year. Like, it's sometimes we make choices that, you know, we regret later, and having that middle step in STEM was incredibly valuable for me. But for humanities, I've seen in both English and world language success in heterogeneous classes. And so I like, I guess, where we are right now. And I'm not really sure where we're going, but I'm wearing socks and Crocs right now. I'm going to college. Y'all can figure that out. So.
So keep going. Communicate with the babies.
Madam Chair, can I request that you grant time to Ben to ask his question? We had every member of the committee who is not going to be here next year, who will not be making a decision on this next year, and Ben will be.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Hi, Ben.
I have nothing more to say.
Very good. Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanie.
Thank you.
Vote from March 16th. We have been communicating with the towns. We had a good ALG meeting today. You know, things are on track for town meetings, and I think, you know, we're all, you know, kind of relieved to be through what was a challenging budget process and be able to move forward. You know, a couple of updates. Ultimately, what we're doing, and there's a memo in your packet, but we are requesting you to revote a line item budget because we've made some adjustments to line items. Two of those requests are a result of staffing requests that we're making for you, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on those. And then the other one is an accounting adjustment. I'll let Dave speak to it, but it's a big number. It's a $1.3 million number, so it will look like it's big. It's just shifting funds between something that's grant funded and budget related right now and just flip-flopping those two items. So there's no actual change to the bottom line budget. It's just a way that will make the job of our accountants a little bit easier for us, or easier on them. So going into a little bit of staffing, and I'll ask Jen Truslow to come up while I'm talking about the first request. Want to talk about all-day kindergarten. As you recall from the budget process, we had in the current year's budget, FY23, we had 17 kindergarten sections. We chose ultimately to reduce 2. One of those sections we chose not to fill this year because it was under-enrolled, and we realized that we didn't need that section. And we always watch our kindergarten enrollment and make sure that we're being smart about how we allocate the number of sections for the number of kindergartners that we have, so we create appropriate class sizes. This year we realized we were trending low on enrollment, so we chose not to fill a position. The other position that we reduced in the budget because for several years now, we've been significantly under NESDEC's enrollment projections and had been questioning what those projections looked like. We knew that was, a challenging decision. I actually think we might have communicated at the time that this was something we were going to need to watch as we progressed through the year and into summer. But we now have completed, kind of the initial round of kindergarten registration. And the enrollment trends seem to have bounced right back to where NESDEC said we would be at this point, which is good news because it means kids are returning into schools, and that's a good post-pandemic trend. We know nationally public schools lost 1 million students since the pandemic, which is the size of the entire student population of New York City. And so we're part of that trend as well. As enrollment comes back, we believe it's important to add back those kindergarten positions, and we were able to do so as we looked at other line items. We looked at some additional staff attrition that came in from some resignations or retirements that were late notices to us. We looked at the sub-budget, and I know we told you we had added extra money into the sub-budget as a result of the additional Chapter 70 aid in the previous meeting, but we really believe we're going to need 2 additional kindergarten positions to maintain enrollment within school committee parameters. We thought about adding 1, and that was where Marie and I had started in this discussion, was adding 1 kindergarten position. We know we're not done with enrolling kindergartners, and we'll continue to enroll kindergartners right up to the start of school. I think what we're thinking about most is, as I think our educators would attest in classrooms, kindergarten is one of the hardest grade levels to teach. When we do kindergarten placement, it's a blind placement process. We have not ever seen these students before. We have a kindergarten screening process, but that's a very, very quick assessment, and the teachers don't know the students. And so what we find in the kindergarten year is classes can be very disproportionately balanced with the needs of students coming in. And we also know that with all of the work that we're trying to do, particularly around social emotional learning, but early literacy and making sure that kids learn to read early, we know that that kindergarten year is an absolutely critical experience for our students. And so, we thought about how we might phase that in, but ultimately we wanted to make sure that we were really within that school committee range when we open school next year. Quite honestly, based on where the trend is going, we probably could be thinking about 3, but we're actually thinking more about 2 at this point. So we're proposing to add 2. It's included in the line item budget we presented to you that we're requesting a vote on. If you don't want to add 2, you could certainly just amend the motion appropriately to reduce to whatever number you believe is appropriate or not add those positions. But adding the 2 positions has no change to the bottom line budget. They are included, and by including them in the bottom line budget, what that also means is by voting it now and including them, it means that there's no fiscal cliff created for FY25. Because those are now in the baseline budget. And so when we go into FY25, it doesn't mean adding $100,000 to the budget to staff a teacher and an assistant. It's already there. It does mean if for some reason enrollment, say it dips in the district over time, we could reduce the position next year, if we don't see that enrollment, but it at least provides that stable base. I don't know if you want to do questions on just kindergarten first or talk special education as well. Okay. The special education assistant director position, I'm very conflicted about this in terms of proposing it because we're in a really challenging budget situation as a district, and simultaneously we're seeing in special education, particularly post-pandemic, the number of very complex and challenging cases, particularly that require coordination between and among schools, is exceeding the staff capacity that we currently have at kind of that management of case level. Our coordinators in the buildings are absolutely amazing. We thought about adding a building level coordinator, but where the most challenging cases that we've had have been where students have to change schools in the middle of a year or are headed out of district for a placement for some reason, and making sure that we're really clear in our communication channels has been critically important to us. I brought Jen here because she can talk a little bit in more detail around special education, but ultimately what we're proposing to do is use essentially circuit breaker reserve to offset general fund expenses for out-of-district tuitions to then be able to fund an assistant director of special education. We believe we have a sufficient circuit breaker fund balance to be able to do that for one, if not even a second year, and then even gradually step it back down into the budget if we decide that that's a position we want to maintain over a longer period of time. But really it's about, you know, focusing on the elementary level is where we've seen the greatest need. It's about looking at, you know, consistency of service delivery across the schools, consistency of processes across the elementary schools, and thinking about how we support the programs at each elementary school, because we've built some amazing programs at each of the schools. We have to make sure we continue to support all of the educators in those and develop those programs. I will say, you know, our programs have been an area of probably greatest staff turnover in the last few years, and that's really concerning to us. And if we don't have the time to support the people in those programs, we're going to continue to see that staff churn. And so we want to make sure we stop that and are a bit more proactive. So again, you know, I understand the optics of thinking about anything in leadership, and, you know, I know you all understand that we have reduced 3 cabinet level positions over the last 2 years at the district level, and I would not be coming to you if I really didn't think this was a critical need of what we have. But, you know, I want Jen to be able to share a little bit of what she's seeing in special education and then provide an opportunity for some questions and answers.
Great, thank you. As always, Peter, you summarized most of what I'm going to say, so, and there's a memo, right? So thank you, yeah, absolutely. So I just really appreciate this time, because I think one of the things I did when I was thinking about what to talk about here is I went back to my entry plan, and when I did my entry plan and met with administrators, teachers, parents, beginning in July of 2021, the areas where I asked all of my questions were about systems, communication, and opportunities for collaboration. That's where I centered my questions around. And across all areas, all parties, everyone discussed the impact of the turnover in special education administrators over the past number of years. They talked about how systems have changed with each director, how things have become inconsistently followed up on staff and followed up at the building and district level. Everyone talked about communication challenges and the accessibility and availability of the director to be able to come to meetings, to have conversations with departments as well as with parents. I also heard that what was happening in inclusion, what was happening in our buildings, as well as in our specialized programs, was really impacted by staff turnover and lack of direction. And the ability for leaders to collaborate with special education administration, again, really varied because of the lack of availability of the director. And as Peter said, when we arrived at school in September of 2021, we saw a significant increase in students experiencing social, emotional, and behavioral dysregulation pre-K to 12. And schools, especially at the elementary level, needed ongoing support and consultation to solve some really complex cases of students who may or may not have been on IEPs, but many of our service providers were being called in to support them. We had new special education coordinators and as well as a number of brand new special education staff who needed ongoing coaching and support. And as Peter mentioned, our specialized programs needed clarity and direction. And because we've been keeping more of our students in district in these programs, we've needed to expand them. And again, with some staff turnover really impacting students, had to look at that as well as looking at the program descriptions themselves, because I heard from families that there wasn't clear descriptions, clear entrance criteria, and really being transparent about what's happening in the programs. In addition to all of that last year, we were also doing creating our MTSS system, looking at our SEL needs. We were doing our disproportionality work and our tiered focus monitoring. And so there was a lot happening. And so at the end of last year, we got feedback from our 9 schools that that they needed more support. And I do mention 9 schools because, as we know, our early childhood program exists because of our students with disabilities, and they have seen a real influx as well of not only students with really complex medical needs, but also hearing from our early intervention providers about what's coming our way. So after we received the feedback, Peter and I and our administrative team knew we needed more support, and we just weren't quite sure what that was going to look like, which is when we brought in Dorsey Yearly and Chris Brownback. You had the administrative or executive summary in your packet, but they came in and met with teachers, administrators, and gave surveys, and all of their guiding questions, again, talked about the organizational structure. Does it provide efficient flow of information? Is there enough support for buildings? And is there collaboration? And they identified in their report that we did not have sufficient special education leadership in place to effectively support the schools. They actually recommended having another special education coordinator added to be able to support specifically the programs at Blanchard and Conant. Peter and I and our admin team reached out to administrators and principals for feedback about that. And principals said, bottom line, they wanted full-time coordinators in their buildings. Their coordinators are really part of their administrative teams and really part of their schools right now, and they're supporting the whole school. Yes, they're guiding, evaluations and supporting programs and staff, but they're really part of the school and coaching both gen ed and special education teachers to be able to support kids who learn differently. So we are recommending the Assistant Director of Special Education position with, as Peter said, primary responsibilities at the elementary level involving, as we were saying, case coordination and consultation for some tricky cases, really supporting students and teachers and families before it gets to the crisis point for students, and especially oversight of our specialized programs and coordination of the processes and transitions of students into those programs as well as out of those programs. And in addition, we also anticipate that this assistant director being able to support our principals with doing some supervision and evaluation of some of our teaching staff as well. And as Peter mentioned, using the circuit breaker funds to take a look at that. And the other piece that we're going to be looking at, we haven't really ironed or thought about it all the way, is how we're going to evaluate the success of this position and the viability of it, because we've heard that schools need more, and we're going to really be looking at sort of what is happening at our schools and how they're feeling with this extra level of support with someone who's on the ground in the schools, in the programs, on a regular basis.
And just to summarize a little bit of that report, what it came back and suggested was hiring, as Jen said, another full-time person just to support the program at Blanchard and Conant. But what that would have meant for those schools, and Jen said principals wanted a full-time person there, it would have meant that like Blanchard and Conant had one person who came in just to support the program, and a different person who was the special ed coordinator for all other students with IEPs. And that we just didn't feel like that was the type of structure our district is based on. We're a very school-based structure. And we didn't think that really made sense in our context. But one of the reasons we also thought about an assistant director level position was really to think about the consistency across the elementary schools was something that we think is very important, especially in special education. It shouldn't matter what school you go to understand that you should have a consistent level of services based on your IEP. I will also note that in addition to another position at the elementary level, that report also indicated that we probably should be thinking about adding another half-time person at the junior high school and a full-time person at the high school. That is not inconsistent with my own past history in my prior district, where we had similar sized district, but we had two assistant directors at the district level. One was not a district person, one was in district, so kind of similar to our structure. But then every elementary school had a full-time team chair, and we had 3 middle schools for the same number of kids, but we had a full-time coordinator in each middle school, and the high school we had 2 full-time people. So, I know the teachers on the ground who work directly with kids are critically important, and we need to make sure that we maintain the right ratios. And we also have to have a leadership structure that supports all of the processes that need to take place for the teachers who are working directly with the kids to be able to do their jobs efficiently and effectively. So, it's not just about one or the other, it's about having the right balance of both, and that's why we're coming to you with this proposal tonight.
I would just add that there's been a significant amount of turnover in the special ed leadership over the past few years, and one of the things that I think we as a school committee focus a lot on is succession plan and what happens should our superintendent leave. Having this position, maybe not in year 1, year 2, we have no desire for Jen to leave us, but it gives us an opportunity for succession planning in other parts of key administrative positions. So, I'm in support of this, not only because I think it will provide a greater level of consistency across the elementary schools, but I also think that it's a good thing for us to start to put in place succession planning for, we would say the group below the highest level administrators.
Can you just talk a little bit about the hiring process for this?
Yeah, sure. If this is approved, you saw the draft job description that's been finalized. If it's approved, we would actually post tomorrow because we know the April break is a prime time for people to think about applying somewhere. We would then develop a hiring team that would include, Jen obviously would lead that process. We would include, other special education coordinators, some principals, some special educators or related service providers. Amanda and I communicated we would involve CPAC in that hiring process as well. And we'd have the committee interview our candidates, recommend, sometimes one, if there's one clear candidate, sometimes it's one that comes forward to me. If there's a couple, then I might see 2 finalists.
Is it late in the school year?
If we don't post soon, we will be very late in the school year, but I think we could still potentially attract some people.
Yeah, and just to add that, I have been reached out by two or three general education teachers also want to be part of the hiring committee too, because again, we're really anticipating this person being on the ground in classrooms. And I can say just in the past 2 weeks, I've seen other towns hiring for assistant directors, because what quite often happens is assistant directors become directors, and then the assistant director position opens up. So it's a little bit late, but I think, again, if this is approved and we're able to post tomorrow, as Peter was saying, April vacation is sort of a prime time when people start to sort of think about moving. And I have reached out to other districts to just kind of find out sort of how some of their hiring processes have gone, and have been pleased to hear that the number of applicants for positions across the board is up. And luckily, we were able to participate, Marie, I've probably shared this, but we were able to participate in a remote or a virtual hiring fair, job fair yesterday, and I was actually able to have a couple of very quick interviews with people who have the administrative licensure, and we're able to sort of have a conversation beforehand. So I'm confident, but yes, it's a little bit on the late side.
Quick. I'll just concur with what Adam said, that you're the 4th SPED director that I have experienced during my time in the district, which I think that, things are unpredictable. We never know how districts are gonna, what kind of money is gonna be there from year to year. And I think that this idea of a succession plan, is an important thing for there to be. In a huge district like this, you need to have levels of people on the ground, people in different places, because you can't be everywhere at the same time. And I do think that, right now that is a gap that we're missing. So I think this is a good idea.
Hi, thank you. I think all of you know me, but for those watching at home, I'm Mike Balulescu. I'm the president of the Teachers Union, also live on Maple Street in Acton. I appreciate the attention to special education here, particularly elementary school special education, because I agree that is an area of incredible need. That's the area that I certainly spend a lot of my time thinking about. And I certainly don't doubt that the work is needed. But we've talked all year about the pain and the necessity of budget cuts and of staff cuts. I've talked at this microphone about the pain and necessity of budget cuts and staff cuts. And my question is, if I'm a teacher watching at home and I've had a colleague and friend told that they're going to be let go because we can't afford them because there's no money, if I'm a special educator in a high needs program like Connections at Conant or Pathways at Blanchard, and I've asked for support in the form of student-facing staff, and I've been told, sorry, no, we can't afford it. I would be frustrated listening tonight to hear that we found $120,000 to fund this position. And I'd just like you to help me and teachers and community members understand why this is the need and why this is the place where we're going to pull that money out of reserves and find it. I'm not disagreeing with the need. There's incredible need, but there's needs all over the district, so why this? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mike, I think that's a great question, and I think, as I said at the beginning, that was my hesitancy, bringing forward anything like this. I would say similar to the rationale why we added 3 English language educators this year, there are sometimes areas that we just have a critical need where even if we have to make reductions in one place, we might still have to add in something else. We always watch special education numbers, and if we ever have a situation mid-year where we see caseloads rise above what's not feasible, then we add staff. We do that with assistants throughout the year. I think, our biggest issue with assistants this year, there just isn't anyone out there to hire. And so we've had multiple positions actually left vacant over the course of the year. We're still committed to making sure that if we have needs on an IEP that have to get addressed, we're going to add the staff to meet those needs. It's not only a moral obligation, it's a legal obligation. I think the issue here at hand is we have to balance sometimes the ability to manage all of the work that we do with the actual work that we do. And this is one of those areas, I don't love the optics of it, certainly. As I said before, I appreciate that sentiment. I don't disagree with the sentiment at all. I actually have that same pit in my stomach talking about it, and yet I still see the critical need for it, and I'm really worried that if we don't do this, we're going to see some real breakdowns, and we're going to continue to see staff churn and leadership churn, and quite honestly, I think in special education, one of the most frustrating things for staff is when leadership keeps turning over and you get new answers to the same questions year in, year out, and if we don't stabilize the leadership, that trend and pattern is going to continue. So that's really, the best answer that I have, but I know it's not going to be fulfilling to everyone.
John Peterson, 6 Jackson Drive. I'm pretty good with math, but there's a part of school math that's always baffled me. And so when Peter says, well, once it's in the base, it's not a problem, I struggle with that because every dollar that's in a base is something that you can't spend on other things that you're interested in doing, whether that's tuition-free kindergarten or anything else. And so I really feel, again, in the context of the budget challenges that we'll face next year, setting the base up in terms of kindergarten sections, in a more aggressive rather than in a less aggressive posture is just not the best possible decision. So as I urged you by email, I strongly encourage you to add one section now. As Peter rightly noted, if situations change radically, there is always an opportunity later to make some adjustments, but tonight's not that opportunity.
So thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing. My name is Amanda Bailey. I'm one of the co-chairs of the CPAC. We had an opportunity to speak with Jen at length about this on Tuesday, and then we spent a lot of time last night at our meeting. Adam was there discussing the same thing and hearing questions from parents and caregivers. I think one of the main questions that continues to come up is this seems to benefit the principals, the coordinators, the director. What is the direct impact on families as team members? One of the questions that keeps coming to mind for me, having been through 6 iterations of special ed leadership in my 9 years, why do we keep churning through leadership? Why do we keep churning through leadership, and how can we stabilize this so that we can have some cohesion, that we can have some consistency? Because just as it's impacting staff, it's impacting us at the table as well, as families, as caregivers, and it's devastating to see these things happen again and again and again. So if this is a chance to improve that, great. I don't think people have a sense of just how much behind the scenes administrative stuff and compliance and time goes into special ed. I think that's not clear to people. And if this frees up more folks to be in the classroom teaching and less time scrambling around trying to deal with compliance and stabilizing hard cases, that's a benefit. But yes, we did have the same questions that Mike just raised about direct student-facing services versus adding middle management. And I would just say, if we are going to make space for this in the budget, what happens next year? What happens the year after when we're facing the same tight fiscal realities and we're going, oh, special ed's really fat. Look at all those middle people in the middle management there. What are we going to do about that? The effectiveness of this role is critical to track. And we also need to look very closely at what the breakdown is in the current coordinator system. I know I've got two of them sitting back there who are phenomenal educators and leaders. But what is the breakdown right now with the coordinators where they are not as effective or efficient as they could be? So that's what I have. Thank you, Jen. Do you have anything?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I wouldn't say that there's a breakdown for coordinators. Right now, I would talk about it's a volume issue. And I feel that because of the number of students that we're currently evaluating this year and last year is really high. It's you know, in some places, you know, we have, at this time of the year, we have people who are currently doing 16 evaluations, which is extremely high at this time of year. And so I feel like it's not quite a breakdown, but it's their capacity. And also, again, when you're doing the processes for your school, but then also managing and supporting programs, again, it becomes a capacity issue. When I think about how this position will benefit families, I think about the conversations that I have with a parent who may have had a challenging meeting and has called me and said, can you come to my next IEP meeting? And then they tell me when it is, and I think, okay, then I have to cancel that parent to go to this and those things. And I think it's really, and so I often have to say to a parent, we either have to change the meeting or I can't come, and we have to, again, follow timelines and things. And so I really feel that this position will be able to support coordinators and all administrators, because also, you know, our speech, our motor department, and our psychology and counseling department chairs are also working to support teams and families in schools as well. And I just feel with the consistency and a common person to go to and the availability of another administrator to be able to support and problem solve will really impact families as well. I'm also very mindful that we are about to be rolling out a brand new IEP that are you excited about that, Amanda? And so I'm very mindful of having to train and do a lot of professional learning around our special education administrators, and not only with the form itself, but then also the technological aspects, because it has to then be built into Power School. And so that's what we're going to be doing all next year, and I feel it's going to be an all hands on deck, divide and conquer, because the impact on families of this new IEP is going to be pretty significant in terms of the format and the expectations of how the information is captured about the students. So I just feel this position will be really beneficial across the board.
Thank you. And the only other thing I'll add, Madam Chair, is that it is a miserable time of the year to be conducting a search for an administrator for special education. And if we cannot find a suitable candidate, if this position is approved, I urge us to be mindful about that process, as critical as the role is, and that we take care with making sure that we find the right person for the role, rather than to ram someone through.
Yeah, you know, just I think it's a great point of this. How does this impact educators? How does it actually impact families? And then ultimately, how does it impact students? Just to go in a little more detail of some things Jen said, you know, and I'm not Ronald Reagan, but there is a trickle-down effect to leadership. And when we think of the issues that I've heard, and Jen is very well aware of because we've talked about it a lot, consistency of process, having clarity to processes, and being able to really know what those are with all of the changes that have happened in special education. I think when there's not really clear, consistent process, then people just default to what they know best. And unfortunately, that can then lead to breakdowns in communication at every level, and that ultimately makes its way and leads to more time spent on task. It leads to more frustration. I think communication around complex cases has been a challenge for us, and in particular, you know, if there's 8 to 10 complex cases bubbling in the district in a given week, which is probably on the low side in terms of complexity, and they're all trying to come to Jen, and she can't get to everyone in an effective way, that means every person in that chain is now waiting for an answer. And ultimately, what it can lead to is miscommunication between buildings, coordinators feeling left out, like they don't have the support that they might need because they can't get to Jen because she's already involved in 3 other things. It can lead to a sense of frustration from educators because they're waiting for an answer on supports or services that they think a student needs. It can delay team meetings. It can delay students getting placement that they might need in a new program or with additional services. And I just think that, you know, but again, we see it as just a leadership role and what are they going to do? But all of that has a chain effect on the entire process, and it ends with students, right? And families are a link in that chain as well.
Thank you.
So, do you want to turn off your mic? I just want to make sure we have an opportunity we need to vote on this. We need to vote on a new line item budget that now adds these 3 positions. Does anybody want to consider any alternatives to these 3 positions or the way that it's currently in its iteration? Liz?
I would like to amend it to just 1 kindergarten teacher for this year or this next school year, just because I do agree, I think that we've had a very difficult budget process. I realize this was my first time going through it, but you know, I would like to wait and see if it becomes a critical need where we need to add the second one later.
Adam?
I understand where you're coming from, Liz and John, but you know, I think we know that there are still summer move-ins to happen, and then over the course of years, there are going to be more move-ins at the 1st grade and the 2nd grade. And if you haven't set up the sections right from the beginning, you end up having to split schools. You end up having to manage that in the future. And overcrowded classrooms will be very close to our recommended limit. And you know, I know several of us have had kids who've gone through at those lower grades that have had class sizes that are closer to that limit, and the ability of teachers to give attention in that and to identify additional needs in those large classrooms is really challenging. So, you know, I think doing it now, doing it without changing our overall budget, gives us the room in the future, and you know, we're going to have the kids no matter what.
Didn't Peter say that they considered adding 3 sections? I mean, did you say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can provide numbers.
That's fine, but just in terms of what Adam said, I mean, our now 9th graders started as kindergartners in the last year of pre-K through 12 regionalization at Blanchard, and they had to add a section in 5th grade because there was only 2 sections, and it was like a huge dire need by that point. So adding a section 5 years later, we were able to do that at Blanchard then because that was before Blanchard became almost overcrowded, but it's not the case anymore. And so I would really, that's why we built the bigger school, was to have more sections. And if we are even on the brink of needing 3 sections, I think it would be crazy to only add 1.
So Marie, I don't know if you can actually maybe confirm numbers for me. I think it's that right now we're at 319 students. So with 15 sections, we're going to average 21.2 students in a class now before we add any summer students, right? If we went with 16 sections by adding 1, that would put us at 19 and change, almost 20 students in a class, correct? If I divide, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, so today we have 319 students fully registered, ready to be placed. And if we do the lottery right now, we have 20 kids in each class. And we anticipate getting 15 or 20 more kids between now and August. As they go through the system, when you start in kindergarten with 20, you're at 26 by 5th grade. So you could, if you wait a year, you're adding the section in one school when you've already got kids distributed. And the only way to help the class size is to move kids from schools, whether they want to be moved or not. in a higher grade. So it's a tricky balance. It's, the projections have been different the last few years. So if we go with one section right now, we would anticipate being 21 and a half, 22 kids by September. And we are already going to be at 20 just with the kids we know we have today.
Just to briefly summarize, and because the numbers were important to us, the recommended, I think the school committee guidelines are 18 to 20 per kindergarten class. Based on 319 students, if we do the 15 sections that we currently programmed for, that would be 21.2 students in a class now with growth over the summer. If we went with 16 sections, in addition of one, that would be 19.9 students, so 20 students in a class now with growth over the summer. And if we go with 17 sections or add 2, that would get us to 18 and a half now per class with growth over the summer. So that's why we're coming forward with the recommendation, but ultimately, we understand it's a school committee decision.
Yeah, I have to look at the numbers and agree with what Adam and Tessa are saying. And listen, it's a no-brainer to me that we need to add these 2 classes. Whether we need to add a third one, I guess we can wait and see what happens. But I mean, just for next year, just for the number of kindergartens we have and the number that we know we'll get over the summer, we're going to need at least 2 more sections.
Okay, so, so I think I'm listening, I'm looking for a motion.
Okay. I move to approve the line item budget as presented in the packet with the stipulation that the total budget and assessments remain unchanged from the committee final budget vote on March 16th, 2023.
Okay, that was Tessa and Adam. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Very good, that was unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. It is 9:55. Superintendent evaluation process. Thank you, educators. It has been a long night and you stayed for so long. Thank you so much. Have a good night, y'all.
All right, one, I'm going to do this quickly, but please don't take the fact that I'm going to try and do this quickly as not taking this seriously. But I want to recognize the time. So in your packet, you're going to see this document. And after this meeting, we're going to send this to you digitally in a format that you can type into, you can print and write on, whatever your preference is. I would gather that whoever's writing these evals, it has to compile 11, would prefer it typed, only because then they can cut and paste different comments and honor different committee members' requests. We want to send it to you tonight because at the next school committee meeting, we're going to come back and provide some more updates on goals and evidence. You already have a lot of evidence from the mid-year update and all the various presentations we've done over the course of the year. But my thought is that by providing this to you tonight, you can actually use it at the next meeting and just make comments and write little notes to yourself on it about thoughts that you have about eval. And that will allow you to be more efficient in how you compile a final evaluation for me. Ultimately, each one of you will complete this evaluation. This is the statewide superintendent evaluation. And you will do a rating for professional practice goal of did not meet, some progress, significant progress met or exceeded. You'll do the same thing for student learning goal, district improvement goals. This is based on your assessment of evidence we provide and all the different presentations we've had, as well as whatever observations you have of my performance throughout the year. There is a subjective element to this. It's your judgment. And so it's not a perfect process, but that's, we want human judgment involved. Otherwise, we could offload this to ChatGPT. You then will give me a rating in each of the following standards for instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. And then there's room for each of these to write comments as an overall summative rating. I pre-populated all of the district goals into this form for you, so it was easy for you to follow. I also have done something called focus indicators, and if you're new to this process, this is an attempt to make it a little bit easier for you to connect the different goals and the work that we've presented to you to the superintendent rubric and the descriptors of what proficient performance looks like. And I'm going to go into that in a second. But if you're looking at the student learning goal and you want to think about what that means from an educator rubric and how you might actually evaluate me on a standard, I'm giving you some suggestions in this focus indicator category of, you'll see there's a standard 1A curriculum, 1B instruction, 1C assessment, 1E data informed decision making, and 1F student learning. And that goes the same for all of the district goals. What those relate to is in this next document, which is also in the packet, the superintendent rubric. And this is a statewide rubric that is intended for all superintendent evaluations. And so when I referenced a focused indicator of 1A curriculum, you can go over to the rubric and see 1A curriculum. Now, I've evaluated educators and leaders on using this rubric now for the better part of 10 to 12 years, so I have a lot of experience with it. The easiest starting point I have found to familiarize yourself with this is go to Proficient and read it, right, for that indicator. And then you can look in either direction of that and kind of get a sense of where you think that falls in performance. But I think the easiest place to start to understand what 1A really is supposed to encompass, it's the proficient standard is a good anchor descriptor for you, and then you can read the different other rubric elements off of that. Questions on that so far? So as you go, you're going to, put a checkbox in any one of these areas on the educator evaluation rubric for the goals. Did not meet some progress, significant progress, met the goal or exceeded the goal. Those are the ratings for each of the goals. And then you will see, you get into all the standards and indicators. There's a lot here. The reason I gave you focus indicators on the goals was because that was the focus of our work this year. And so I would gather you should start there because there's no way you can ever really truly comment on every single indicator in an educator rubric. People who do this for years still don't do that. We don't try and do that with educators because it's overwhelming and not really focused. You want to try and focus the feedback typically on the work that's done or other areas that stand out for some reason. Either you have a concern about it or you found it to be particularly impactful and you want to offer a comment on it. Those are some easier ways to approach this work. So you will give me a rating for every indicator under standard 1, then you go to standard 2, give me a rating, standard 3 rating. There's an opportunity to provide comment on each of the standards. You can either comment on each standard or you can just provide summary comments at the top. The way the rubric is designed is the state has recommended for proficient performance that it's nice to have comments, but comments are required, particularly if you're not just giving a proficient rating. So if you think it's exemplary for some reason or needs improvement or unsatisfactory, that's a required comment because whoever's being evaluated should know why they're being rated something other than proficient typically. I would suggest doing all of the individual standards first before you try to do the summative rating. Because if you haven't done all the standards, it's awfully hard to figure out what you think the overall rating is. We will present evidence at the next meeting. This is a great note-taking device for you to put some notes and comments in. That will be a good start for you. The goal of this is that you would have then 2 weeks from the next meeting. So you'll get evidence May 4th. You'll have 2 weeks to complete your individual evaluation. You are returning that evaluation to Kyra, correct? She and I believe Adam are going to collaborate on developing a composite evaluation. They would have 3 weeks to take all 11 committee members' comments, develop an evaluation. That will be brought to the June 8th meeting where it gets read aloud by law and then voted on as a school committee.
Peter, I think in the past we've also had everybody send it to Beth as the secretary so that the individual evaluations are captured in addition by the secretary as well as going to the.
That's great,
folks who are
yeah,
running.
thank you. Yeah, please send a copy to Beth as well. And I would suggest, you know, with the number of positions turning over, this is going to be a really critical eval to have by that deadline so that everyone can get, you know, do their job on the other end of it to compile the feedback. Okay. Any questions for me in terms of process? Okay. Mid-year goals update, I believe, is in your packet, but you've received that. That has a lot of evidence. And also, we linked all of the presentations we did at the beginning of the year in that mid-year goals update. You'll see that again in 2 weeks, some additional evidence. Granted, our mid-year goals update was in March, so there's not a lot of different stuff that you're going to hear, but there will be some updates for you based on the end of the year update.
Thank you, Peter.
I'll just add, as Peter's heading back to the table, what's always helped me, and Peter mentioned it quickly, is to start with the standards that are the bottom part of the rubric. Go through those, look at what's been the focus indicators. If you find those to be something other than proficient, put a comment in there. It's very helpful for those who are then writing the summary evaluation, that if there's something that is above or below proficient, there's some comments that then can support that in that paragraph around that. And then as you work yourself up back to the beginning of the document, it actually sort of forces you to summarize everything with the last step 4 evaluator comments on page 2. That's been a way that has helped me break this down because it's an extremely daunting form with all of the information. And I know Tessa's going to say one other thing, which is evidence, evidence, evidence. So just saying he did a great job and marking it exemplary is really hard for then the person who's writing the summary evaluation to point to evidence that said this was exemplary because. That's what makes things really helpful. And by all means, if you don't have the time or desire to write a complete sentence, just some bullet points, something that points back to obviously all the evidence that Peter's going to give us. That will help those of us who are writing this summary prepare it quickly.
And it's a shared document. So it really is imperative that people other than the chair provide specific evidence or thoughts around all of those indicators, because whoever is writing the document, Kyra, Adam, I don't know who else, ChatGPT, really, that makes it like a million times easier. If you read like 11 of these or 10 of these assessments and there's just check marks on everything that's like, I really appreciate Peter's effort this year, that makes it incredibly difficult because that summary then has to be read at the school committee meeting and it has to have actual content in it. So, thank you.
Hey, Beth.
Can I just say that the individual evaluations are public documents and could be, released, so whatever you send in on your own is public.
Very good. All right, here we go. Subcommittee member reports at 10:10. You ready? Acton Leadership Group.
Met this morning, we discussed, Peter shared what we voted on today for the budget, discussed that it will be, a lot of members will be turning over. John Mandrati is looking to hopefully get together the new ALG sometime in July.
Community engagement, anybody who was there?
We're meeting tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Policy sub.
We had a policy sub meeting last week, determined we needed to meet with representatives of the Scouts per the full committee's direction. We still couldn't figure a lot of stuff out. We had that meeting this week, waiting for follow-up and hoping to have a new draft voted at our next policy meeting and presented to the school committee at its next meeting after that, which is not the 4th of May.
Budget sub.
The best thing about budget sub is we met on Monday, we discussed everything that we discussed in the budget presentation today. The only additional thing we reviewed was our annual town meeting presentation, which was supposed to be in the FYI for this evening, but Adam's been busy and I have not updated the document. The plan is that I will update it, and then those two will be presenting at town meeting. We'll work on the speaker's notes for that, so that's our next step in that. Kyra's going to help with that.
Yeah, we'll see what Kyra helps with. SROs.
The SRO subcommittee met Tuesday the 11th. We reviewed potential survey questions to elicit community feedback. We also divided up research for the members for presentation at a later meeting. We anticipate finalizing the survey at our next meeting, and the Chief of Police, Jim Cogan, and Sergeant Keith Campbell are also due to attend to answer questions. The next meeting is Wednesday, May 3rd at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Booyah. Anything I missed? Awesome, here we go. Consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda do not usually require discussion and are approved with one vote unless any member would like to hold an item for discussion and a separate vote. I will read each item name, and if any member would like it held, please say hold. Members do not have to have attended a meeting to vote on the minutes. 1, approval of the ABRSD meeting minutes for 3/2/23 and 3/16/23. Item 2, new R.J. Gray JHS Club, the Neurodiversity Club. Very cool. Given there no items were held, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Second.
Okay, we're gonna give that to Ginny and to Adam. Yes, okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, no opposed, no abstentions, great. The consent agenda is approved. Warrants, please.
I move that the school committee vote to approve the below listed warrants totaling $10,346,013.41. AP vendor warrants as follows: 23-019 dated 3/16/2023 in the amount of $737,184.07. 23-020 dated 3/30/2023 in the amount of $1,884,975.43. 23-020A dated 3/30/2023 in the amount of $7,176.08. Payroll vendor warrants as follows: 23-019 PR dated 3/23/2023 in the amount of $1,238,037.02. 23-020 PR dated 4/6/2023 in the amount of $594,151.20. Payroll warrants as follows: P2319 dated 3/23/2023 in the amount of $2,911,632.11, and P2320 dated 4/6/2023 in the amount of $2,972,857.50.
We're gonna give that one to Amy. It was Tessa and Amy. All those in favor?
Aye.
No opposed or abstentions. Very good. Peter, is there anything you'd like to highlight in the FYI?
Two things in the FYI. One, very quickly, I attended a conference in New York City with a group of national superintendents, sponsored by District Management Group, who, if you remember, did our original social emotional program review, but then they are also the group that introduced me to Cartwheel Care. They actually had asked me to present with Cartwheel to this national group of superintendents on kind of what's the district's model that we're thinking about around social emotional learning and a tiered system of supports there, but how does Cartwheel fit into that, and why might this model be worth building out? So I included the slides from that presentation in your packet. Deb and Jen Faber also attended that with me, and a lot of the sessions we attended together were around academic return on investment and how to use strategic budgeting to make sure that you're investing your money in programs that are working for kids. So that was a particular area of interest. The other item I want to call your attention to, we have a draft of next year's school committee calendar in there. I want to call your attention to it now because we're not talking about it tonight, but we should have a conversation with the newly seated committee around what meetings look like for next year. And I did account, or Julie accounted for the MASC conference, so we already have the date amended for that. We had put some tentative budget date holders in that, and we also we put a placeholder. We don't know the date of the workshop, but we're targeting a week in July to try and do a workshop, just trying to coordinate dates that I know I'm around. I would love to propose with the new committee considering trying to do one full day as a workshop. I think it's a very, very new group. that's going to need to be able to come together and have some discussions about how the group wants to function together. And I think being able to provide time and space for a full-day workshop would go a long way to setting the right tone for the upcoming year. So I just want to put that on the radar. Right now, it's hopefully the week of July 17th, but we can talk about that at an upcoming meeting. And then the other thing that you'll see highlighted on that is just to throw out, is there any interest in thinking about a different start time to a meeting? A number of boards and committees in the town start at 6:30 instead of 7, which helps to prevent nights that end at 10:15. It had better. I don't know. So just a thought, but we put 6:30 or 7 just so we could spur a discussion about that. That's it for me.
All right, very good.
I would like to recognize the fact that there are 3 very important members of our committee who are leaving tonight. And as much as we would like to get out of here, we have to thank Yebin, Kyra, and Amy for their service. Thank you very much.
It's been my honor. Has it been your honor?
It's been my honor. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
He didn't say my name.
You're not here yet.
Peter said I was.
So this is the last meeting of this full committee. So as a district, we thought it would be nice actually to just recognize all of the departing members, even though we know Boxborough members will be with us at the next meeting. This is really the last meeting of this committee that's sitting here tonight. And so, I think on behalf of the district, I just want to say from all of our staff, thank you for all that you've done. Some of you, it's been 9 years. Some of you, it's been 3 years. But regardless of the duration, the impact that you get to have on the kids and families in the district is really profound. And I've appreciated all that each of you give, the different perspectives that you have. The committee is not designed to always agree, and you get better decisions coming from people who don't agree on every issue. And so I just want to say thank you from all of us in the district to all of you who are departing, and it's been a pleasure working with you, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for all the hard work of saying thank y'all. We appreciate it. Thank you, Beth, for all of that coordination. And I'm sure thank you, Julie, for coordination. Thank all y'all. Thank you.
And as you know, it's also been tradition that as school committee members depart, we give a chair, one of the alumni chairs that we have in the district. We actually have them here tonight, so they're outside in the hall in boxes. We're happy to help you with that. Exactly. So thank you all very much, sincerely.
Thank y'all. It really has been. It's been an honor and sometimes a pleasure. Most of the time a pleasure, about 99% a pleasure. Just kidding. 100% a pleasure. Anybody have any words to say before we take a motion? Because it's really late, y'all.
I move to adjourn.
Second. That was Jenny and Adam. All those in favor? Aye. Good night, y'all.